Mariah Samuels did everything right. She called the police. She got a protective order. She recorded the attack on camera. She spoke about what was happening publicly. On September 14th, 2025, at 7:45 in the morning, she posted a final cry for help on Facebook, video evidence, and an accusation against the Minneapolis police for failing to protect her. 8 minutes later, the 34-year-old mother of 2 boys lay dead on the doorstep of her own home. Her ex-boyfriend rode up on a bicycle. He had 20 years of criminal history, a conviction for the exact same kind of assault on a previous girlfriend, and a federal sentence for illegal firearms. The system knew everything about him and did nothing. On September 14th, 2025, a Sunday morning dawns in Minneapolis. On the north side, in the Willard Hay neighborhood, it's quiet. Houses stand close together, yards are small, streets still empty. In a house on Russell Avenue North, in the 1400 block, 34-year-old Mariah Samuels is already awake. She's a dog groomer, a mother of 2 boys. Today is her day off, but there's no peace. Her ex-boyfriend is nearby again. During the night, around 4 in the morning, he was stalking her. The protective order she received less than 3 weeks ago didn't stop him. The police, whom Mariah had already called more than once, didn't stop him either. At 7:45 in the morning, Mariah opens Facebook. She posts surveillance camera footage. The recording shows a man attacking her. She attaches screenshots of threatening text messages. And she writes an angry post. The police served him with a protective order, she says, but it changed nothing. He stalks her at 4 in the morning, and nobody cares. It's a scream into the void, directed at friends, at followers, at anyone who might read it. 8 minutes after that post goes up, police receive a call. A resident from a neighboring house reports roughly 12 gunshots near the house on Russell Avenue. When emergency services arrive on scene, they find Mariah on the ground by the open driver's door of her gray Jeep Compass. Multiple gunshot wounds, 15 shell casings found at the scene. Mariah Samuels is pronounced dead on site. Between her last Facebook post and her death, 8 minutes. To understand what happened that morning, you have to go back. Mariah Rosanna Samuels grows up in a large African-American family in Minneapolis. Her mother struggles with parenting, and from an early age, Mariah is raised by extended family. Aunts, uncles, cousins. The house is always full of people, voices, the smell of cooking. Her aunt, Yvonne Winston, would later tell reporters that the family was close, that everyone loved Mariah. "There's nobody else like that girl," Yvonne would say after it was all over. Mariah finds her niche. She becomes a dog groomer and gets a job at the Petco chain. She has a gentle touch with animals. Neighbors, acquaintances, her many relatives all bring their pets to her. She's the preferred groomer for the whole block. The work doesn't pay much, but it gives her stability and a sense of purpose. At the same time, Mariah is raising 2 sons. The older one is 11. She lives in her father's house on Russell Avenue, in the Willard Hay neighborhood. The north side of Minneapolis is a tough area. High crime rates, tense relations between residents and police, chronic underfunding of city services. But it's home. This is where Mariah grew up, where her family lives, where she takes her boys to school. Less than a year after a 51-year-old man with a lengthy criminal record is released from federal prison, he appears in Mariah's life. Their relationship will last about 7 months, and then a countdown begins that will end on Russell Avenue that Sunday morning. That man is David Eugene Wright. He's 51 years old, and his criminal history in the state of Minnesota runs several pages. 3 drug convictions, 2 for armed robbery, 2 for property destruction, check fraud, identity theft, contempt of court, disorderly conduct, illegal possession of a firearm. This isn't a person who stumbled once. It's a long, documented chain. But one line in his record stands apart. In 2003, Wright points a stolen pistol at his then-girlfriend. Her 15-year-old daughter is standing right there. The reason for the conflict is familiar. The woman is ending the relationship and asking him to leave the house. Wright responds with a gun. When the teenager tries to dial 911, he rips the phone cord from the wall and smashes the handset on the floor. Then he threatens to shoot them both. For this, Wright gets 5 years in prison and a domestic assault charge. The pattern is documented: breakup, loss of control, a weapon. In 2009, Wright is back before a court, this time a federal one. The charge, illegal possession of a firearm. The sentence, 15 years in federal prison. It's the longest stretch in his biography. Wright is eventually released on supervised release, and less than a year later, he meets Mariah Samuels. She's 34, he's 51. He's just spent a decade and a half behind bars for the very thing he wasn't allowed to have. Their relationship begins. Nobody warns Mariah about who she's dealing with. 7 months later, on August 21st, 2025, Mariah decides to leave. She ends the relationship with Wright over the phone. His reaction is instant. Text messages start pouring in, one after another. "If you don't bring your ass home right now, I'm about to blow this beat down." Then another. "Man, someone going to die tonight." This isn't an argument. These are direct threats. Later analysis of the texts would show that throughout the relationship, Wright was controlling and jealous. He was convinced Mariah was in contact with an ex-partner, and it sent him into a rage. That same evening, Mariah drives to her ex-partner's house in North Minneapolis to drop off her 11-year-old son. Routine, handing off a child. But Wright tracks her to that address. He knows where she went, and it only confirms his suspicions. When Mariah comes out of the house, Wright attacks. He assaults her with a pistol, uses physical violence. All of it is captured by a home surveillance camera. The footage is saved. It will become evidence. Mariah calls the police, but Wright disappears before officers arrive. They log the call, take her statement, note that the suspect fled. The paperwork will read, "Gone on arrival. Suspect left before police arrived." The case is referred to the domestic violence unit. Mariah is left alone, with a bruised face and a recording on her phone that proves everything. She waits for the system to do its job. The system starts working, but slowly. 5 days after the attack, on August 26th, a victim advocate from the Hennepin County Domestic Violence Services visits Mariah at home. He helps her file for an order for protection. The order is requested not just for Mariah, but also for her 11-year-old son. The next day, August 27th, a judge signs the document. On August 29th, the order is officially served on Wright. From that point on, any contact with Mariah is prohibited. No calls, no messages, no visits. He is not allowed to come near her. On paper, everything looks right. Mariah does exactly what domestic violence experts recommend. She calls the police, files a report, seeks help, gets a protective order, goes through every step of the process. She doesn't skip a single one, but at the same time, something else becomes clear. The August 21st attack, the one with the pistol, the fence, and the surveillance camera, is classified by the Minneapolis police as "gone on arrival." The suspect fled before the patrol arrived, and the case was referred to the Domestic Violence Unit for investigation. Except, there's no one to investigate it. The unit has 5 detectives. 6 years ago, it had 12. The number of domestic violence calls, meanwhile, keeps growing every year. Mariah's case lands in an ever-growing queue. The protective order has been served, but nobody checks whether Wright is actually following it. Nobody calls Mariah to ask if she feels safe. The document is signed, the procedure formally complete. A paper shield stands between Mariah and a man who has already shown that paper won't stop him. A day passes, then a week, then 2. From August 21st to September 13th, 20 days, not a single detective is assigned to Mariah Samuels' case. An assault with a pistol, an attempted strangulation, surveillance footage that captured it all, a court-issued protective order, and not one call from a detective, not one step forward. The case sits in a pile, alongside dozens of others just like it. The Hennepin County Attorney's Office sends a request to Minneapolis police for additional investigation. No response. The Domestic Violence Unit at MPD is so overwhelmed that incoming requests simply aren't processed in time. 5 detectives for the entire city, less than half of the original 12. And the high-risk team, which is supposed to track the most dangerous domestic violence cases, identify those closest to the point of no return. It's not functioning. There's another layer that isn't working. Wright is on federal supervised release. He served 15 years for illegal possession of a firearm. Now, he's threatening someone with a gun again. That's a direct violation of his release conditions. But neither the Federal Probation Service nor local police are communicating with each other. 2 levels of the system. federal and city, exist in parallel and never intersect. Information isn't shared. No alarm bell goes off. Mariah doesn't stay silent. She posts the assault video and screenshots of the threats on social media. She tells people what's happening, but the official system she turned to is on pause. Ann Wright, who received a protective order and sees that there are zero consequences for violating it, draws his own conclusions. September 14th begins long before dawn. Around 4 in the morning, Mariah discovers that Wright is nearby again. He's stalking her. The protective order served on him 16 days ago means nothing to him. Mariah calls 911, reports a violation of the order. Wright is sending threatening text messages. Police take the call. What happens next is unclear. Nobody shows up. Nobody arrests Wright. The system receives the signal and once again fails to respond. Several hours pass. Morning arrives. At 7:45, Mariah sits down and opens Facebook. She can't stay silent anymore. She posts the surveillance camera footage, the recording of the August 21st attack, showing Wright assaulting her. She attaches screenshots of his latest messages, and she writes a post that thousands of people will read, but only after it's too late. Mariah writes that she tried to stay quiet, but he's stalking her at 4 in the morning, and the police aren't doing anything beyond serving a protective order that obviously doesn't work. At 7:47, she adds a few more posts. She accuses the officers of inaction. She says the system has failed. Every word is a documented testament that a woman is aware of the danger, is asking for help, and is not receiving it. These posts will remain publicly accessible. They will be quoted by newspapers, television stations, and city officials. But in the moment Mariah hits post, no one who could have intervened is reading her words. It's the last thing she'll ever write. At 7:53 in the morning, 8 minutes after Mariah's final post, the dispatcher's phone rings again. A resident on Russell Avenue reports roughly 12 shots. This isn't a shootout between strangers. This is a targeted attack. David Wright rides up to the house on a bicycle. He knows this address. He knows Mariah is here. He pulls up close and opens fire at point-blank range. He fires multiple shots. 15 shell casings will be left on the asphalt and the grass by the house. Mariah is near her Jeep Compass, maybe about to drive away, maybe she just walked to the car. A witness from a neighboring house looks out the window and sees a man with shoulder-length dreadlocks, wearing a long-sleeved shirt, open the driver's door of the Jeep and shoot the woman. Other witnesses hear a volley of shots. They see Wright try to pull Mariah from the car. He can't manage it. Then he grabs the bicycle, the same one he rode in on, and leaves. When emergency services arrive on Russell Avenue, Mariah is on the ground by the open driver's door. Paramedics pronounce her dead at the scene. She's 34 years old. She has 2 sons waiting for their mom at home. The last thing the world heard from her was an angry Facebook post written 8 minutes earlier, a post in which she says the system doesn't work, the police aren't helping, the order doesn't protect. Every word turned out to be true. This time, police act fast. Witness descriptions match. A man with shoulder-length dreadlocks, a long-sleeved shirt, a bicycle. Surveillance cameras in the area fill in the picture. Investigators already have a name: David Eugene Wright. The protective order issued against him includes a photo and address information. Everything lines up. Within 24 hours, Wright is apprehended in Anoka, a suburb north of Minneapolis. He's not hiding, not trying to run far. During the interrogation, he acts as though what happened was inevitable, not a crime. His first words to investigators: "I'm not going to fight this situation. This is not going to be a hard-fought case." He doesn't deny he fired the shots, doesn't ask for a lawyer. Instead, he suggests the police read the text messages between him and Mariah. He says then they'll understand why he did it, as if a text exchange could explain a woman's death on her own doorstep. Wright is charged with second-degree murder for Mariah's death, plus a separate count for illegal possession of a firearm. He was on federal supervised release after 15 years in prison for that very same offense, and he was firing a gun again. The pattern documented back in 2003, breakup, loss of control, a weapon, repeated exactly. Only this time, he went all the way. Mariah's family learns of her death not from the police. The information comes through social media and news feeds. This is yet another layer. The system that failed to protect Mariah while she was alive doesn't even notify the people who care the most about her death. A few days after Mariah's death, dozens of people gather at that same house on Russell Avenue. Relatives, friends, neighbors, strangers who read her last post and showed up. They begin a march. The route goes from the house where Mariah was shot to the 4th Precinct of the Minneapolis Police on Plymouth Avenue. That's the precinct that serves the North Side, the very one whose officers responded to Mariah's calls. Aunt Yvonne Winston speaks into the microphones. There's nobody else like that girl. She remembers how the whole family raised Mariah, how she found herself through working with animals, how she loved her sons. But the central question of the march isn't about who Mariah was. The family states it clearly. Mariah did everything she was told to do. She called 911, filed a report, got a protective order, shared her story publicly on social media with video evidence. She followed every step recommended to victims of domestic violence, and she still died. The family demands full transparency from the Minneapolis police. They want to know why, in 20 days, not a single detective picked up Mariah's case. Why the 911 call the night before her death didn't lead to Wright's arrest. Why a protective order violated multiple times carried no consequences. They point to the obvious. Mariah was a black woman from the North Side. And they ask, would the system have failed a white woman from the suburbs just as badly? Meanwhile, another case surfaces in the city. Allison Lucier, a Native American woman, is found dead in her apartment in February 2024. Police ruled the death an overdose, but the medical examiner determined the cause, subdural hematoma, a traumatic brain injury. 2 women, 2 failures of the same system. The pressure mounts, and in October, Minneapolis Police Chief Brian O'Hara does what the city demands. He publicly calls what happened to Mariah a systemic failure, not one officer's mistake, not a coincidence, a failure of the system. The admission rings loud, but behind it are concrete actions. O'Hara orders the retraining of all Minneapolis police officers on domestic violence response protocols. Deadline: by the end of 2025, a new standard is introduced. At every call involving a domestic conflict, the officer must verbally ask the victim whether she feels safe and take proactive measures based on the answer. This seems obvious, but before Mariah's death, no such requirement existed. O'Hara also orders a full internal review of how the Samuels case was handled. An investigation by the Star-Tribune newspaper exposes the scale of the problem. MPD's domestic violence unit has 5 detectives for a city of more than 400,000 people. In 2019, there were 12. The high-risk team, whose job is to track the most dangerous cases and identify situations nearing the point of no return, isn't operational. Hundreds of cases marked "gone on arrival," sit untouched. Mariah's was one of them. Families of other domestic violence victims begin to speak out. They assert that MPD systematically fails to protect women of color. Hennepin County releases an official statement about ongoing failures by the city of Minneapolis in addressing domestic and intimate partner violence. The city finds itself under dual pressure, from within, from its own residents, and from outside, from county and state agencies that see local police failing at a task on which lives depend. In November 2025, the Hennepin County prosecutor upgrades the charges against David Wright. Instead of second degree, he now faces 2 counts of first-degree murder, premeditated homicide, and homicide with a documented pattern of domestic violence. The basis for the second count is the 2003 incident. Back then, Wright pointed a pistol at an ex-girlfriend in exactly the same way after a breakup. The system documented that pattern 22 years ago, and 22 years later, it repeated, with a fatal outcome. Mariah's family responds with restraint. It's a step in the right direction, they say, but not enough. Upgrading the charges won't bring Mariah back. It doesn't explain why for 20 days nobody investigated her case, why a 911 call in the middle of the night didn't lead to an arrest, why a man on federal supervised release, with a firearms conviction, was walking around with a pistol again, and nobody noticed. In December, a grand jury upholds the first-degree charges. Wright faces life in prison without the possibility of parole. The Minneapolis City Council passes a resolution in support of the Samuels family. Mariah's name is mentioned at hearings on police protocol reform, in civil organization reports, on social media, where her last post is shared thousands of times. The case of Mariah Samuels is not the story of a single crime. It's the story of a system that received a warning and failed to act. A woman did everything right. She asked for help. She got a document that was supposed to protect her. She publicly documented what was happening, and 8 minutes after her last post, she was dead. The question that remains is simple. Will her death change anything for the next woman who calls 911? 25-year-old Doris Aguilar does everything right. She reports to her employer. The stalker gets fired. She switches gyms 3 times. He finds her every single time. She files a report with the police. No response. She tells her friends, if something happens to me, he's the one responsible. On the 1st of July, 2024, Doris vanishes in Phoenix. 6 days later, she's found in a restaurant parking lot, in the same car as the man she'd been running from for an entire year. Beside him, a notebook with a fabricated story and a gun without a safety that the stalker, for some reason, chose to write about. Phoenix, Arizona, a city where the sun spares no one, and summer temperatures blow past 50 degrees Celsius. This is where Doris Maricela Aguilar lives, a 25-year-old woman originally from Honduras. Most of her family stayed behind in her home country, thousands of kilometers from Arizona. Doris is building her life in Phoenix on her own. She works at a distribution center, does her job diligently and without complaint. But the real center of her life is fitness. Doris goes to the gym every single day. For her, it's not just a habit, it's a ritual, a structure, an anchor. Friends and acquaintances call her a health and wellness fanatic. She never misses a workout. Among the people Doris crosses paths with at work is a man named Juan Jose Vélez Cuellar. He's 51 years old, nearly twice her age. They work in the same building, but there's no close relationship between them whatsoever. Cuellar begins showing Doris obsessive attention. At first, it looks like inappropriate flirting, but it quickly crosses the line. Doris doesn't reciprocate. She makes it absolutely clear she's not interested. Cuellar doesn't stop. His behavior becomes persistent and frightening. Doris makes a decision that should, by all logic, solve the problem. She goes to company management and reports what's happening. The company responds, Cuellar is fired. In any safety handbook, this is considered the right move. Report, document, secure consequences. Doris follows the playbook to the letter. The problem is, Cuellar has no intention of playing by anyone else's rules. The termination that should have been a period at the end of this story turns out to be just a comma. Cuellar loses his job, but doesn't lose interest in Doris. Quite the opposite. Stripped of the ability to see her at the office, he looks for other ways. Cuellar works as a Lyft driver. He has no permanent address. He lives in his car, parking at random lots across Phoenix. For a man with no address and no schedule, there are no boundaries that are hard to cross. He knows where Doris spends time every day. The gym. Cuellar starts showing up in the parking lot of EOS Fitness, the gym where Doris trains. Every time she walks out after a session, he's already there, waiting. He doesn't approach, doesn't speak, just exists nearby. This is no coincidence, and Doris knows it. She makes a decision, she switches gyms, moves to a different one. Time passes, and Cuellar reappears in the parking lot of the new gym. Doris switches again, and again. After some time, he finds her. Over the course of a year, she changes gyms at least 3 times. Each time, she hopes this will be the time he loses the trail. Each time, that hope proves futile. Cuellar doesn't hide his obsession. He tapes a photograph of Doris to the back of his cell phone. This isn't a hidden snapshot buried in a folder on his screen. It's an open display. Anyone who picks up his phone or simply glances at it sees Doris's face. To Cuellar, she's not a living person with a right to freedom and safety. She's an object of fixation, the center of a world that exists only inside his head, and that world is becoming more dangerous by the day. Physical presence in parking lots is only one side of the stalking. Cuellar ventures into digital territory. He creates a new Facebook account under the fake name Johnny Dallas. It's not his real name. It's a mask behind which he tries to conceal his identity. Through this account, Cuellar begins sending Doris messages on Messenger, one after another, intrusive, persistent, leaving no space for silence. Doris doesn't respond. She ignores every message, every request, every attempt at contact. Silence is her only weapon. But for Cuellar, silence means nothing. He keeps writing, and then the tone of the messages shifts. Cuellar starts sending Doris photographs of weapons. One image shows a rifle lying on the back seat of a car. The profile picture of the Johnny Dallas account is an image of a handgun. This is no longer requests for a meeting or attempts to start a conversation. This is a display of force, a message without words. I'm armed. Doris understands the full scale of the threat. She doesn't withdraw. She speaks about it openly. She tells her friends. She tells family members who live far away in Honduras. Her words, which her friends will remember forever, go like this: "If something happens to me, he's the one responsible." This isn't panic and it isn't exaggeration. It's a clear-eyed assessment from someone who understands she's in a zone of real danger. Doris names her stalker. She documents the threat. She warns those around her. She does everything a person can do when they lack the authority to arrest, detain, or isolate the individual threatening them. On the 9th of June, 2024, Doris finds herself at a Walmart store in Phoenix, a routine shopping trip. But among the shelves and registers, she spots a familiar figure. Cuellar is here. He's following her. Not at the gym, not in a parking lot, in an ordinary store she walked into for everyday needs. This means he's tracking her movements beyond her usual routes. The boundaries of the stalking are expanding. Doris makes a decision that many victims never bring themselves to make. She goes to the police and files an official report, documents the incident, names him, describes the situation. This is the first formally documented report Doris files with law enforcement regarding Cuellar's stalking. After the report is submitted, silence follows. There's no evidence that police took any active measures, no information about a protective order being issued, no indication that anyone contacted Cuellar, warned him, or detained him. The report was filed, and by all appearances, it went into a folder. Doris doesn't wait for help from above. She acts on her own. She switches gyms again, this time to Lifetime Fitness. This is no longer the first or second change. Each time, it costs money, time, and nerves. Each time, it means a new route, a new schedule, a new attempt to create distance between herself and a man who refuses to recognize that distance. Doris hopes that this time, Cuellar won't find out where she's moved. That Lifetime Fitness will be far enough, new enough, unfamiliar enough. The system received a signal from someone asking for help. The system didn't respond. Between the report and what would happen next, 22 days remain. On the 27th of June, 18 days after Doris's report to the police, a new post appears on Facebook. The Johnny Dallas account, that same fake profile belonging to Cuellar, publishes a brief update. The text consists of 2 sentences. "Getting my lifetime membership back. See you soon." Those 9 words contain everything. Cuellar knows exactly which gym Doris has moved to. He knows the name of the chain. He knows she's there. The post is written publicly. Anyone can read it. But there's only one intended recipient. This isn't an invitation. It's a notification. Cuellar is telling Doris, "I found you again. Your latest attempt to escape has failed." Alongside the post, Cuellar takes a practical step that speaks to preparation. He rents a car. His own vehicle, the one he lives in, the one Doris would recognize on sight, becomes unsuitable for what he's planning. A rental car can't be identified. Doris won't recognize it in the parking lot. She won't see a familiar silhouette and become alert. Renting a car isn't an impulse, it's calculation. A man who lives in his own car and works as a Lyft driver spends money on renting a second one. There has to be a reason. 4 days remain until Doris disappears. The post sits in public view. Cuellar's friends see it, random followers of the Johnny Dallas account, possibly the social media algorithms themselves. But no one reads it as a warning. No one connects the phrase, "see you soon," with an actual threat. 9 words on a screen. Cuellar's last public statement before he moves from words to action. On the evening of the 1st of July, 2024, Doris leaves her home. What exactly brings her to the parking lot of a shopping center is unknown. Maybe she's running errands. Maybe someone arranged to meet her. Surveillance cameras in the parking lot capture a moment that will become pivotal to the investigation. Doris arrives in her own car. She parks. Then she walks over to another vehicle and gets in. It's Cuellar's rental car, not his old one, the one Doris would recognize, the one he lives in. A new, unfamiliar one. The footage shows no visible signs of coercion. Doris appears to get into the car voluntarily. What exactly leads her to do this is one of the central mysteries of the case. Does she know who's behind the wheel? Or is Cuellar using the rental car precisely so she won't recognize him? After Doris is inside the car, the vehicle leaves the parking lot. The cameras capture the departure. Doris Mariah Aguilar is never seen alive again. The next day, the 2nd of July, her family realizes something is wrong. She's not in touch. She doesn't answer calls. She doesn't come home. The family contacts the police and reports her missing. A search begins. Doris's friends spread the word on social media. They post her photos, a physical description. About 163 centimeters tall, roughly 63 kilograms, curly brown hair, brown eyes. They ask anyone who's seen Doris to contact police. The city is big. People go missing all the time. But those who know Doris know something else. She has a stalker. And they know his name well. The search yields no results. Day after day, no trace of Doris. Her phone is silent. Her social media accounts are inactive. Her family, living thousands of kilometers away in Honduras, receives news in fragments and can't do anything. Those who are nearby, friends, acquaintances, turn to a professional. The family hires private investigator Steve Fisher from Search Investigations. Fisher specializes in missing persons. He launches his own investigation in parallel with the police effort. He studies Doris's connections, her routes, her contacts. And of course, he studies Cuellar. A week passes. On the 7th of July, around 8:30 in the evening, police receive a call. The parking lot of a Longhorn steakhouse. The address, 75th Avenue and Encanto Boulevard, the western part of Phoenix. Someone noticed a car that had been sitting in the lot for days. A distinctive smell is coming from it. Officers arrive on scene and discover 2 bodies inside the rental vehicle, one male, one female. Both are in a condition that makes identification difficult. Arizona heat in early July means 50 degrees and above. 6 days in a sealed car under that sun makes on-site identification impossible. But the investigators notice a detail that links the discovery to the missing person case. Cuellar was well known at this very parking lot. A Lyft driver living in his car, he often parked right here, by the Longhorn Steakhouse on Encanto Boulevard. This was his regular spot, his territory, a place where he felt at home because he had no other home. And it's right here, in this parking lot, that his story comes to an end. The condition of the bodies prevents rapid on-site identification. Days pass before the Maricopa County Medical Examiner completes the work. On the 19th of July, nearly 3 weeks after Doris's disappearance, Phoenix police issue an official statement. One of the bodies belongs to 25-year-old Doris Mariah Aguilar, the other to 51-year-old Juan Jose Velez Cuellar, the very same man Doris had been warning friends and family about for over a year, the one whose name she spoke when she said, "If something happens to me." The medical examiner determines the cause of death. Doris died from a gunshot wound. Her death is classified as a homicide. Cuellar's death is classified differently, as self-inflicted. A firearm is found near him. The picture these facts paint looks like this. Cuellar took Doris's life and then his own. Private investigator Steve Fisher, working for the family, publishes an emotional statement on social media. He calls Cuellar a coward who took someone else's life and didn't have the courage to face the consequences. Fisher describes Doris as someone who loved fitness, worked hard, and helped others. For the family in Honduras, this is confirmation of their worst fears. Their daughter, sister, loved one, the one who left for America to build her own life, was killed by a man who believed she belonged to him. But even after the identities and causes of death are established, questions remain. The facts don't add up to a simple picture. Certain details suggest that events may have unfolded in ways more complex than they first appear. One of the details that doesn't fit the straightforward narrative is discovered even before the bodies are identified. On the 9th of July, 2 days after the parking lot find at Longhorn Steakhouse, Police locate Doris's own car. It's sitting in the parking lot of Christown Spectrum Mall, in the central part of Phoenix, an entirely different neighborhood. From Christown Spectrum to the Longhorn Steakhouse on 75th Avenue is more than 15 kilometers. Doris's car is unlocked. Inside, her wallet, her passport, credit cards, cash, everything in place, everything untouched. The only things missing are Doris's cell phone and her car keys. A robbery motive is ruled out completely. The person who took Doris's life didn't take a single cent from her. He was interested in something else entirely. The very fact that Doris's belongings remained in her car tells investigators something important. She left for a short time. She planned to come back. When Doris got into Cuellar's rental car in the shopping center parking lot on the 1st of July, she left everything she valued and needed in her own vehicle. Passport, money, documents. That's what a person does when they expect to step away for a few minutes and then return to their car and drive home. But now, a question arises. Doris's car is at Christown Spectrum Mall. The bodies were found in Cuellar's car at Longhorn Steakhouse, in the western part of the city. 2 cars, 2 different neighborhoods, a distance between them that can't be covered on foot. Someone moved one of the cars, or someone transported one of the bodies. Either way, the simple version, everything happened in one place, stops working. Among the items found in the rental car, one draws particular attention from investigators. A notebook. It belongs to Cuellar. Inside, pages filled with his handwriting, entries about Doris, about his feelings for her, about how he thinks about her. For the investigation, it's confirmation of an obsession documented by the stalker himself. But one entry stands out from the rest. In it, Cuellar describes the moment Doris died. He writes, "It was an accident. My gun was lying on the side of the seat. She picked it up. She didn't know the safety was off. I tried to take the gun back and it went off. Then, I panicked and drove away. I knew they would blame me no matter what." This is an attempt to construct a version of events in which Cuellar isn't a perpetrator, but a witness to a tragic accident. A version in which Doris caused her own death by accidentally picking up someone else's gun. But Sergeant Rob Scherer of the Phoenix Police dismantles this construct with a single fact. The gun found in the car doesn't have a safety in the traditional sense. The weapon has no switch that can be turned off or turned on. Cuellar writes about a safety that doesn't exist. The key element of his story is a lie. And if the central mechanism of his described accident is false, the entire story is false. Cuellar didn't just kill Doris. He sat down afterward and wrote a fabricated version of events. He tried to control the narrative even after what he'd done. These are the actions of someone who plans, who thinks a step ahead, who, even in the final minutes of his own life, wants to appear as a victim of circumstance rather than what he truly is. The lie in the notebook isn't the only thing that calls the official version of events into question. Private investigator Steve Fisher, working for Doris's family, presents a theory that changes the entire picture. According to his findings, the rental car lacks biological evidence that Doris was shot inside the vehicle. There are no traces typically left behind when a firearm is discharged in an enclosed space. Fisher states it plainly. It looks like she was moved. If this is true, then there's a second crime scene, a location where Cuellar took Doris's life, from which he then transported her body to the rental car, after which he drove the vehicle to the Longhorn Steakhouse parking lot, his usual spot. This theory explains several inconsistencies at once. Why Doris's car ended up at a different shopping center, 15 kilometers from where the bodies were found. Why surveillance cameras captured Doris getting into Cuellar's car in one parking lot, while the bodies are discovered in an entirely different one. If Fisher is right, Cuellar didn't act in a fit of passion. He moved a body. He relocated cars. He chose where to leave the rental vehicle. He wrote a false version of events in a notebook. Each of these actions requires time, composure, and a plan. Phoenix police have neither officially confirmed nor denied the private investigator's theory. The investigation continues, but the question itself remains open. Where exactly did Doris Aguilar die? The answer could reveal not only the final minutes of her life, but the degree of preparation with which Cuellar carried out what he did. The extent of Cuellar's preparation only became clear after his death. While he was alive, stalking Doris, following her from gym to gym, sending messages from a fake account, forwarding photographs of weapons, the system saw him as a nuisance at most, not a lethal threat. For the family in Honduras, news of their daughter's death arrives across thousands of kilometers. They can't fly in right away, they can't be there, they can't change anything. Doris's friends organize a GoFundMe fundraiser. Money is needed for the funeral, for the family to travel, and to send Doris's remains home to Honduras. The case of Doris Aguilar sparks a wave of discussion that stretches far beyond Phoenix. Critics point to the obvious. Doris did everything victims of stalking are told to do. She reported to her employer. The stalker was fired. She changed her routes and habits, switched gyms 3 times. She filed a report with police, documented the incident with Aguilar at Walmart. She named him to friends and family. She said, "If something happens, he's the one responsible." Every one of those steps was right. Not a single one was enough. Arizona's stalking laws, like those in many other states, proved unequipped for someone like Aguilar. A man with no address, no steady job, no ties to any fixed location, but in possession of a firearm and a fixation stronger than any restraining order. Doris Mariah Aguilar was 25 years old. She came from Honduras. She loved fitness, she worked hard, she helped others, she asked for help. She was 25, and she had her whole life ahead of her. Kristil Krug does everything by the book. She keeps a spreadsheet of threats. She goes to the police. She files reports. She documents every contact from a person who claims to be her ex-boyfriend from high school. But on December 14th, 2023, she's found dead in the garage of her own home in Broomfield, Colorado, 11 days before Christmas. Police go looking for the stalker and quickly find him. Then they discover the stalker never existed. Who was behind the hundreds of threatening messages? Who bought the burner phones? And why does Kristil's husband call the police asking them to check if his wife is still alive? Broomfield, Colorado. The Anthem neighborhood. One of those Denver suburbs where the houses look like they were pulled straight off a real estate brochure. Neat lawns, a good school district, quiet streets where young parents jog with strollers in the morning. This is where the Krug family lives. Husband, wife, and 3 kids, 2 daughters and a son. From the outside, it's the textbook picture of the American middle class. But by December 2023, that picture is already cracking, and no one outside the house yet understands how deep the fractures run. Christina Grimmie is born on November 24, 1980. Her father, Lars, is an immigrant from Norway who came to the States in 1974 and built a career as an aerospace engineer. Kristil grows up in a household that values hard sciences and discipline, but she also finds time for another world, ballet and contemporary dance. She performs at the Arvada Center for the Arts and Humanities, balancing the stage with her textbooks. In 1999, she graduates from Stanley Lake High School in Westminster as the top student in her class, valedictorian. After that comes the Colorado School of Mines on an academic scholarship, one of the most prestigious engineering schools in the country. Then a transfer to the University of Colorado Boulder, where Kristil earns a degree in chemical engineering. She's used to solving hard problems, used to effort producing results, to the system working, to the idea that if you do everything right, everything will be fine. She meets Daniel Krug online, back while she's still in school. He's a student with a passion for technology. In 2007, they get married at Holy Ghost Catholic Church in downtown Denver. A wedding full of music and dancing. 3 children are born, a house in Anthem. Kristil works as an engineer, Daniel in information technology. Life follows the plan that Kristil has a habit of making for everything. But not everything in Kristil's past is as neatly arranged as her career. In high school, she dates Jack Anthony Holland, first love, intense, brief, with an inevitable ending. In the fall of 2000, they break up. Holland moves away, and that's it. No calls, no letters, no meetings. For more than 20 years, there's 0 contact between them. Holland becomes a distant memory, a name from a yearbook that only comes up in conversations about the old days. And then in August 2023, Kristil receives an email. The sender identifies himself as Jack Holland. The first messages seem harmless, nostalgia about the school years, an attempt to reconnect after a long-lost bond. But the tone shifts fast. Persistence turns into obsession, and obsession into open aggression. Messages start coming not just by email, but through text messengers. Their content becomes vulgar and threatening. The sender claims to be watching the Krug family, says he knows their daily routine, sees when they leave and when they come back. Kristil is scared, more than 20 years of silence. And suddenly, a person from the distant past shows up with an obsession she never noticed in him. She remembers Holland as a regular guy from school, nothing frightening. But the messages keep coming, day after day, and each one sounds scarier than the last. Kristil is used to solving problems with logic and action. She starts documenting every contact, an engineer's approach to the nightmare unfolding on her phone screen. In October 2023, Kristil walks into the Broomfield Police Department. She doesn't bring just a complaint, she brings a system, a detailed spreadsheet. Every contact from the stalker, logged with date, time, and content. Separately, she's put together a timeline of her old relationship with Holland, so the police can understand the context. An officer's body camera captures the conversation. Kristil is calm, but you can hear the fear in her voice. She explains what's happening, shows screenshots, points out patterns in the messages. On October 31st, she files an official report. The stalker's behavior continues to escalate. Messages become more frequent and more threatening. Kristil does everything by the book. She documents, contacts law enforcement, preserves evidence. She behaves like the ideal stalking victim, if that word can even have such a definition. She doesn't panic, doesn't ignore, doesn't try to handle it alone. She works through the system. But there's another detail that doesn't raise any red flags with the police at that point. Daniel Krug, Kristil's husband, is also receiving threatening messages, supposedly from the same person. He shows officers photos where the stalker is allegedly watching him from a car, from the street, from near the house. Daniel comes across as a husband who's worried about his family, concerned, involved, ready to protect. The police see a couple united by a common threat, two parents trying to shield their kids from a frightening stranger from the wife's past. They take the report and begin working to identify the pursuer. It doesn't occur to anyone to check where those photos were actually sent from. The case goes to Detective Andrew Martinez. On November 12, 2023, he files search warrants for digital records with 3 companies, Google, Verizon, and TextNow. It's standard procedure, requesting information about the phone numbers and email addresses used to send the threatening messages. A judge signs the warrants, and Martinez sends them off 5 days later. Now, it's a waiting game. And here's where the problem begins. One that will later become one of the most painful questions in this case. A week goes by, 2, 3. Not a single one of the 3 companies sends a response. The warrants sit in the system, somewhere between servers and legal departments of corporations that process thousands of these requests a month. For Google and Verizon, it's routine. For Kristil Krug, it's time she's running out of. The situation is made worse by a typo. One of the warrants for Google contains a technical error. It has to be resubmitted. Martinez sends the corrected version on December 6th. The resubmitted warrant also disappears into silence. No response. Meanwhile, in November, Kristil meets with her father, Lars. Together they go over his .22 caliber pistol, in the presence of a local police officer. A woman who's used to solving problems with spreadsheets and systems is now considering the need for armed self-defense. She's genuinely afraid. The information that could change everything already exists. IP addresses, phone purchase records, connection logs. All of it sits in the databases of tech companies waiting to be processed. If the answers had come in time, the investigation would have traced the source of the messages weeks before it was too late. But the warrants go unanswered, and time keeps slipping away. November turns into December, and the messages from the stalker don't stop. Their tone grows more sinister, no longer hints or ambiguities, but direct threats. The sender describes knowing where the children go to school, when Kristil leaves the house, which route she takes to work. Every new message raises the stakes. Fear stops being background noise. It becomes part of the Krug family's daily life. Daniel plays his role flawlessly. The worried husband who discusses every new threat with his wife. He sympathizes, offers solutions, shows that he's under pressure too. After all, the stalker is writing to him as well. When Kristil looks for support, Daniel is there. When she calls the police, he stands behind her. The family looks like a united front against an outside threat. But behind the scenes of this family drama, another story hides. People close to Kristil will later tell investigators that she'd been planning a divorce for a while. She wanted full custody of the children. The marriage was falling apart, not because of the stalker, but for reasons that existed long before the first fake email. Kristil wants to leave, but in the middle of a growing threat from an ex-boyfriend, she relies on her husband as an ally. The irony she can't appreciate. The person she leans on in her moment of fear may be the source of that fear. 11 days until Christmas. The kids are getting ready for the holidays. There's a tree in the house. And every morning, Kristil checks her phone with dread. What came in this time? She doesn't know that the danger is closer than any message. It's inside the house. On the evening of December the 13th, 2023, it's an ordinary night. The kids are busy with their own things. The house settles into its usual pre-holiday routine. Nothing about this evening sets it apart from dozens before, except for the mounting tension from the stalker's messages, which the family has almost gotten used to. Kristil goes to bed, not knowing it's her last evening in her own home. At the same time, someone in this house is sitting at a computer. A digital forensic analysis conducted later will record search queries made that night from a home device. Among them, a query about how to knock a person unconscious with a blow. This isn't idle curiosity. It's not a medical question. It's calculation. The person typing this into the search bar has already made their decision. A few miles from the Krug home, Detective Martinez's warrants are still waiting for a response. Google, Verizon, Text Now, none of the companies have sent the data. Information capable of revealing the true identity of the threat's author exists in digital form, stored on servers, ready for delivery. But between that information and the Broomfield police stands a bureaucratic wall. Processing times, legal reviews, request queues. The answers will come, but not today, and not tomorrow morning. And tomorrow morning is when everything will be decided. On December 14th, 2023, Kristil Krug wakes up, gets 2 of the children ready, and drives them to school. An ordinary morning, an ordinary route. She comes back home alone. Around 8 in the morning, she walks into the garage, and at that moment, everything ends. Someone is waiting for her. The attack comes from behind, without warning, without a chance to defend herself. Kristil sustains fatal injuries. The woman who documented every threat and brought spreadsheets to the police lies on the floor of her own garage. After the attack, a different phase begins. The cleanup phase. At 8:15, someone uses Kristil's phone to disable the home's security system. The Ring doorbell camera, the device that records everyone who approaches the front door, is covered with blue painter's tape. The tape is taken from a kitchen drawer, which means whoever does this knows exactly where everything is in this house. 3 of the 4 surveillance cameras are disabled. Whoever is erasing the evidence understands technology and knows this home's security system from the inside. Delayed text messages are programmed from Kristil's phone. One is addressed to her brother, another to the Broomfield detective handling the stalking case. The content of both is designed to create a false trail. They claim Kristil was unfaithful, an assertion that will later be completely disproven. These messages are set to go out later, creating the illusion that Kristil is still alive and using her phone. Someone very carefully thought through what would happen after the attack, and that someone definitely didn't drive in from Utah. 8:22, the last time Kristil's phone registers any activity. After that, silence. No calls, no messages, no apps opened. But at 8:56, 2 pre-programmed messages go out from the same phone. Those very ones with the false claims. Between the last real use and the sending of the messages, 34 minutes of nothing. That gap will later become one of the key pieces of evidence. A living person doesn't leave their phone untouched for half an hour, then suddenly sends 2 messages and goes silent forever. The morning passes, noon arrives. Around 12 o'clock, a call comes into the Broomfield police. It's Daniel Krug. He's requesting a welfare check. He says he can't reach his wife. Calls go unanswered, messages get no response. He reminds them about the stalker situation. He presents himself as a worried husband who fears for his wife's safety against a backdrop of months of harassment. An officer arrives at the Krug home in the Anthem neighborhood. He finds Kristil on the garage floor with no signs of life. At 12:43, the death of Kristil Krug is officially recorded. She's 43 years old, 11 days before Christmas, in a house with a tree up and 3 children waiting for the holidays. A woman who did everything right, documented the threats, went to the police, kept records, is found dead. The house that should have been the safest place on earth became a crime scene. And the first question investigators ask themselves, was this the work of the stalker who'd been pursuing her for months? The logic of the investigation points in one direction: Jack Anthony Holland. Months of threats in his name, a documented history of stalking, police reports. It all adds up to a picture where the ex-boyfriend from high school finally went from words to action. Broomfield detectives start looking for him and find him quickly. Holland lives in Eagle Mountain, Utah, a small town more than 8 hours' drive from Broomfield. When investigators reach Holland, he's not hiding and he's not denying anything. He's in shock. He has no idea what's going on. And he has something that immediately changes the entire picture: a receipt. On December 14th, at 12:16 in the afternoon, at a time when Kristil was still formally alive, Holland was buying a hoodie at a store in Eagle Mountain. An ordinary purchase, a casual stop at a shop, a receipt with date and time. It's physically impossible to cover the distance from Utah to Colorado, and back in that window of time, Holland could not have been in Broomfield on the morning of December 14th. He's immediately and completely cleared. Holland will later tell reporters something unusual. He believes Kristil's spirit nudged him to walk into that store at that exact moment. A random purchase saved him from a false accusation. But clearing Holland creates a problem far bigger than the absence of a suspect. If the stalker isn't Holland, then someone spent 4 months impersonating Holland. Someone created fake accounts, bought burner phones, sent threatening messages under someone else's name. Someone knew enough about Kristil's past to pick that specific name. The investigation starts over from scratch, and this time, the gaze inevitably turns to the person who stood closest. Detectives shift to digital archaeology. Now, they're not looking for a stalker. They're looking for whoever invented one, and the digital trail leads not to Utah, but much closer. The IP addresses from which the threatening messages were sent trace back to a specific building in Colorado. It's the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, a government office where Daniel Krug works. One of the fake email accounts used for the stalking was created on a password-protected corporate network. Only an employee could access it. Then there are the phones. The burner phones that had been sending messages for months under Holland's name were purchased with a prepaid Visa card. The card is registered in the name of Daniel Krug. This isn't an anonymous purchase. It's a trail left by someone who was certain no one would check. The geolocation of these burner phones repeatedly matches the location of Daniel's personal phone. They're in the same places at the same times. And finally, the photos. Those same pictures Daniel showed to the police as evidence of surveillance. Supposedly the stalker photographing him from a hiding spot. Forensic analysis establishes Daniel was photographing himself. He was simultaneously creating the threat and presenting it as a victim. The picture converges on a single point. The husband who stood by his wife's side for 4 months, sympathized with her, discussed threats with her, went with her to the police. He is the author of those threats. According to the prosecution's theory, Daniel was losing control of the marriage. Kristil wanted a divorce and full custody. First, he tried to scare her with a fake stalker to pull the family back together. When he realized the investigation would inevitably expose him, he took the most extreme measure. Daniel Krug is arrested and charged with first-degree premeditated homicide, 2 counts of stalking, and criminal impersonation. In April 2025, a trial begins that will last 2 weeks. Daniel Krug sits at the defense table, pleading not guilty to all 4 counts. Deputy District Attorney Kate Armstrong paints a portrait for the jury of a man who played puppeteer, created a fake identity, terrorized his own wife, and when he realized he was losing control, eliminated her. The prosecution's case rests on digital evidence, IP addresses from his workplace, burner phones on his Visa card, search queries the night before the crime, and pre-programmed messages from the victim's phone. But the defense has an argument that can't be ignored. Attorney Joe Morales draws the jury's attention to a paradox. Despite the gravity of the charges, there isn't a single piece of physical evidence linking Daniel to the attack. No blood was found on his clothing, not a single trace in his car. Daniel's daughter confirms on the stand. On the morning of December 14th, when her father drove her to the school bus, he was wearing the same clothes as always. No stains, no damage. Daniel Krug's DNA was not found at the crime scene, but a partial DNA sample from an unknown person was found on Kristil's neck. The origin of that sample has never been determined. The defense goes further, attacking the system itself. Broomfield police knew about the threats, were working the case, had filed warrants, and couldn't protect Kristil while she was alive. Morales poses the question, if law enforcement was this negligent, how much can you trust the quality of their investigation after the crime? Two worlds collide in the courtroom. The world of digital evidence, where every bit points to Daniel, and the world of physical forensics, where his traces are nowhere to be found. It's at this very moment that the prosecution plays a card that shifts the atmosphere in the courtroom. A former girlfriend of Daniel Krug takes the witness stand. Her testimony pulls the story back decades, and at the same time, sheds light on the present. She testifies that after their breakup many years ago, Daniel began stalking her, not in person, not physically, through a screen. He created fake online personas, sent anonymous messages, constructed fictional identities to monitor and control her. The same pattern, the same tools, the same logic. The defense tries to challenge the relevance of this testimony. Too much time has passed, the circumstances are different, the legal connection is unclear. But for the jury, these words provide the context that was missing. What happened to Kristil isn't an isolated incident, not a spontaneous breakdown by a person in crisis. It's a repetition of a long-practiced scheme. Daniel Krug didn't invent his method in 2023. He'd been perfecting it for years. The prosecution uses the ex-girlfriend's testimony to demonstrate two things: premeditation and a consistent pattern. A person who has used the same control tactics through fake identities for decades doesn't act on impulse. He knows what he's doing. He's done it before, and he knows how it works. When Kristil started slipping out of his control, wanted a divorce, full custody, Daniel activated his familiar mechanism. Only this time, he raised the stakes to the limit. For the jury, the ex-girlfriend's testimony closes the loop. The digital evidence showed the what and the how. The testimony showed the why and who this person really is. Daniel Krug is not just a defendant in a single crime, he's a person with a history. On April 17, 2025, the jury retires for deliberation. It doesn't take long. The verdict, guilty on all 4 counts: first-degree premeditated homicide, 2 counts of stalking, criminal impersonation. The digital evidence outweighed the absence of physical traces. The jury believed the IP addresses, the burner phones, the search queries, and the pre-programmed messages. They believed the behavioral pattern confirmed by the ex-girlfriend. They believed the logic that left no room for any other explanation. The following day, April 18th, Judge Priscilla Lowe hands down the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole, a mandatory measure under Colorado law for first-degree premeditated homicide, plus 9.5 additional years for stalking and criminal impersonation. The maximum sentence on those charges. The terms are served consecutively, not concurrently. Before sentencing, the courtroom becomes a place of collective grief. Kristil's loved ones rise to the stand one after another to deliver victim impact statements. Parents, a stepsister, aunts, uncles, cousins, friends, from school years through adult dance classes. Each speaks about what's been lost forever. Kristil's father, Lars Grimsrud, that same Norwegian immigrant, the aerospace engineer, stands before the judge and calls his son-in-law's actions pure selfish evil. He says the last 16 months, from the loss of his daughter to the verdict, have been absolutely traumatic for the family, especially for the 3 children who lost both parents in a single day. Their mother forever, their father behind bars for the rest of his life. Lars says this in a steady voice, but behind every word is grief that doesn't fit inside a courtroom. Kristil and Daniel Krug's 3 children now live with Kristil's brother and his wife. The extended family helps however they can, but nothing replaces what's been taken. 2 girls and a boy are growing up knowing that their father took their mother from them. They lost both parents at the same time, one forever, the other behind prison walls for the rest of his life. They'll have to live with that knowledge. The case of Kristil Krug leaves behind a question the system has no comfortable answer for. Could the police have prevented her death? Detective Martinez's warrants for data from Google, Verizon, and TextNow were filed on November 12th, a full month before December 14th. If the tech companies had responded on time, the IP addresses would have pointed to Daniel's workplace well before that morning in the garage. Kristil did everything that was asked of her, documented every contact, went to the police, kept records, filed reports. The system didn't fail her in theory, it failed her in time. The answers came, but too late. The partial DNA of an unknown person found on Kristil's neck remains unexplained. The defense used it as an argument, the prosecution ignored it. That detail is still open. The case draws massive media attention. ABC dedicates an episode of 2020 to it under the title, He's Right Behind You. Dateline NBC releases an investigation called The Phantom. Both titles turn out to be bitter irony. The threat really was standing right behind Kristil. She lived with it under the same roof, shared breakfasts with it, and discussed a protection plan with the very same person she needed protection from. Kristil Krug's story became part of a national conversation about the speed of response to stalking and the responsibility of tech companies to the law enforcement system. But for the Grimsrud family, it's not a conversation. It's life without Kristil. On May 20th, 2023, Taylor Dragicevich is driving back from the movie theater to her mother's home in Kalamazoo. She had left her ex-boyfriend, obtained a protective order, changed her address. She did everything victims of domestic stalking are told to do. But underneath her car, a GPS tracker is attached, and the man she was hiding from is already waiting in the parking lot. Between the moment Taylor's mother went upstairs to her apartment and the moment she came back down and found her daughter, 4 minutes had passed. This is not a story about what Taylor did wrong. This is a story about why the system that promised to protect her failed. In the small town of Galesburg, Michigan, 28-year-old Taylor Ann Dragicevich wakes up every morning and drives to work along a familiar route. She was born on March 15th, 1995, in nearby Kalamazoo, along with her twin brother Morgan. They had been side by side their entire lives, same birthday, same memories, same family. Their mother Cindy lives nearby, in the Emerald Park apartment complex on East Cork Street in Kalamazoo. Their father is Robert, a typical family from western Michigan, where everybody knows everybody. After graduating from Kalamazoo Valley Community College, Taylor takes a job at Wenke Greenhouses. This is not a temporary gig. She stays for 8 years. She starts in an entry-level position but gradually works her way up to supervisor. Her coworkers remember her smile. She would walk into the greenhouse and the whole atmosphere would shift. Taylor loved plants, loved people, and was always ready to help anyone. Her manager, Lisa Ambrosio, would later say, Taylor wanted to do more than what was expected of her. She gave her all not because anyone made her, but because she simply did not know any other way. At work, Taylor grows close to Regina Rapier. For 4 years, they work side by side, and between them, a bond forms that cannot be manufactured. Both had survived domestic violence. Both knew what it was like to live in fear next to the person who was supposed to be the closest to you. Their friendship was built on shared experience they would have rather never had. In her personal life, Taylor is 8 years into a relationship with Jeffrey Kucharski from Lawton, a small town 30 minutes from Kalamazoo. 8 years is half her adult life. To the outside world, they are a stable couple. But behind the walls of the apartment they share, something is happening that Taylor keeps silent about for a long time. Taylor's silence lasts years. The relationship with Jeffrey Kucharski begins around 2015. She is 20, so is he. At first, everything looks normal. A young couple in a small Michigan town, shared routines, shared plans. But by 2019, the picture changes. Taylor would later document it in official filings. Kucharski begins showing aggression. He hits her. He throws objects at her. He stages dramatic scenes threatening to harm himself every time she tries to set boundaries. But there is a detail that goes beyond ordinary control. Taylor describes it in her protective order petition. Kucharski slips contraceptive medication into her drinks. This is not an outburst of anger or jealousy. This is calculated interference with her body, her choices, her future. Control taken to a biological level. Taylor does not leave right away. She stays the way millions of women around the world stay in similar situations. Not because she does not understand what is happening, but because leaving a controlling partner is the most dangerous moment in such a relationship. The statistics confirm it. The risk of severe assault spikes dramatically during the period of separation. By early 2023, Taylor makes her decision. 8 years is enough. She is no longer willing to live this way. But she understands that simply packing up and walking out is not an option. She needs to do it quietly, invisibly, so Kucharski does not find out in advance. Taylor begins planning her departure the way one plans an escape, because for her, that is exactly what it is. In the first week of March 2023, Taylor does what she had been preparing for months. She secretly moves out of the apartment she shared with Kucharski. She leaves no address. She makes no scene. She simply vanishes from his space, quietly, quickly, before he can react. Taylor knows that an open confrontation during a breakup with someone like him could end in anything, so she acts like a person fleeing danger, not a relationship. But cutting off contact entirely does not work right away. Around March 4th, the two meet to exchange remaining belongings. It is supposed to be a formality. Grab your stuff and go your separate ways. Instead, Kucharski pulls out a blade. He does not point it at Taylor. He threatens to harm himself right in front of her. This is a textbook manipulation tactic. If you leave, I will do something terrible to myself, and it will be on your conscience. Taylor does not give in. She perceives what is happening as a threat, not only to him, but to her. On March 8th, 2023, she files a petition with the Kalamazoo County Court for a personal protection order. In the petition, she describes years of aggression, the blade incident, and her fear. The court reviews the materials and grants the order. Kucharski is now prohibited from approaching Taylor, showing up at her home, or appearing at her workplace. Wenke Greenhouses responds immediately. Management implements additional security measures to protect Taylor at work. Her co-workers know about the situation. Everyone hopes the order will work, that a piece of paper with a court seal will be a sufficient barrier. Taylor wants to believe it too. She has done everything she could. Left, filed, obtained protection. The system is supposed to work. On paper, everything looks right. But a protective order is a piece of paper. It only works in a world where the person is willing to follow the rules. Kucharski is not that kind of person. For him, a court prohibition is a formality that can be bypassed if you act discreetly. And he finds a way. Kucharski installs a GPS tracker on Taylor's car, a small device secured beneath the body of the vehicle that transmits coordinates in real time. Now, he does not need to follow her in person. He does not need to risk showing up near her and violating the order in front of witnesses. The tracker does it for him. Every trip Taylor makes, to work, to the store, to her mother's, to friends, shows up on his phone screen. Within days of the breakup, Kucharski learns everything he needs: where Taylor lives now, where she drives, who she visits, what routes she takes. Taylor thought her secret move would hide her from her ex-partner. But the tracker turned her car into a beacon, constantly broadcasting her location to the very person she was trying to hide from. Taylor's mother, Cindy, would later say her daughter felt like she was being watched. Taylor felt cornered despite the order, despite every precaution. She could not figure out how Kucharski knew where she was, but her gut told her he had not backed off. She does not know about the tracker. Nobody does. The device works silently, invisibly, 24 hours a day, turning her life into a glass room where her every move is visible to one person. The protective order prohibits Kucharski from approaching Taylor, but he does not do that, not physically. He watches from a distance, patiently, waiting for the right moment. Kucharski's patience runs out on May 11th, 2023. He shows up right at Taylor's workplace, at Wenke Greenhouses, the very same greenhouses where management specifically tightened security to protect her. The very same place where co-workers know about the situation and are ready to respond. Kucharski comes openly, in broad daylight, ignoring both the protective order and common sense. This is a direct violation of the court's prohibition, the first one documented. That same evening, police find him near Taylor's home, a second violation in a single day. He is detained and taken to the Kalamazoo County Jail. For Taylor, this moment should have been confirmation that the system works. She asked for help, received an order, and when the order was violated, police responded and the offender was arrested. But what happens next turns this story from a personal tragedy into a systemic failure. Kucharski is released that same day, May 11th, arrested in the evening and let go. A man who violated a protective order twice in one day walks free within hours. On May 12th at 4:30 in the morning, surveillance cameras capture Kucharski near Taylor's home again. Less than 24 hours since his arrest. He does not even try to hide. He simply comes back, as if nothing happened. As if the arrest was a minor inconvenience that changes nothing. The system receives a clear signal. This man will not stop. The order does not restrain him. Arrest does not scare him. Being released, he takes his permission to continue, but the system does not read that signal. No additional measures, no heightened monitoring, no warning to Taylor that Kucharski is nearby again. 8 days pass, and every single one of those days, the tracker on Taylor's car keeps transmitting coordinates. On May 20th, 2023, a Saturday, Taylor spends the day with her family. She, her twin brother Morgan, and their mother, Cindy, go to a movie theater in Kalamazoo. Fast and Furious 10 is playing, a typical blockbuster for a typical family evening. 3 people who enjoy being together. For Taylor, this is the normal life she left Kucharski to have, spending a Saturday with her mom and brother without looking over her shoulder, without checking whether someone is following. After the movie, Taylor and Cindy head back to Emerald Park, the apartment complex on East Cork Street where Cindy lives. Taylor stops by her mom's place, a routine visit, a familiar route. She parks in the lot in front of the building, the very same car with a GPS tracker secured beneath it. Kucharski does not know Taylor was at the movies. He does not need to. The tracker does not transmit context, only coordinates. He sees Taylor's car moving, stopping, moving again. And when the car stops at Emerald Park, he sees a dot on the map. He knows this place. This is where Cindy lives. He knows the layout of the complex, knows where the parking lot is, knows how to approach unnoticed. Investigators would later establish that a vehicle registered to an address in Lawton, the town where Kucharski lives, was spotted near the Emerald Park complex at exactly this time. He is not just tracking Taylor remotely. He drove there. He is here, in the parking lot, next to her car, next to her mother's apartment. 2.5 months of covert surveillance have reached a point of no return. Cindy gets out of the car first. She walks up the stairs to her apartment, a routine movement that takes a couple of minutes. Taylor stays downstairs by the car. Maybe she is checking her phone. Maybe she is grabbing something from the back seat. An ordinary pause that in any other situation would mean nothing. About 4 minutes pass. Cindy comes back down, and the world as she knew it ends. Her daughter is lying in the parking lot, signs of a knife attack. It happened in broad daylight, in an open parking lot of a residential complex, just steps from the front door. Taylor is still alive. Cindy calls for help. An ambulance takes Taylor to the hospital. Taylor and Dragicevich will die from her injuries. She is 28 years old. Between the moment Cindy went upstairs to her apartment and the moment she came back down and found her daughter, 4 minutes had passed, 240 seconds. That was enough time for the man who had been waiting in the parking lot to do what he came to do. Kalamazoo police arrive on scene and begin working fresh leads. The attack, in broad daylight in a residential area, leaves evidence, witnesses, cameras. A vehicle is spotted near the complex that does not belong to any of the residents. Registration records lead to Lawton, a small town 30 minutes south of Kalamazoo, the same Lawton where Jeffrey Kucharski lives. For investigators, the connection is obvious. An ex-boyfriend with a stalking history, a violated protective order, an arrest 9 days earlier, and now his car at the crime scene. On May 21st, the day after the attack, police arrive at the address in Lawton. It is a private house with a garage, the same address where the vehicle spotted at Emerald Park at the time of the crime is registered. Cell phone data confirms that Kucharski's phone was in the area of East Cork Street on May 20th, during the very minutes when Taylor was wounded in the parking lot. Kucharski does not open the door. He is hidden in the attic of the garage. A standoff begins that lasts several hours. Negotiations, police commands, waiting. Eventually, he is taken into custody. In the attic, next to Kucharski, lies a large knife. On the blade are traces that laboratory analysis will later link to the crime. In his car, parked at the house, rubber gloves with similar traces are found. But the most critical piece of evidence awaits investigators on Taylor's car. Underneath the body of her vehicle, forensic technicians find the GPS tracker, a small electronic device that records and transmits the car's coordinates. On the tracker's casing is a fingerprint. Analysis will determine that the fingerprint belongs to Jeffrey Kucharski. This is the final link in the chain connecting everything: the stalking, the surveillance, the attack, and the flight. The totality of evidence leaves no room for doubt. The knife in the attic, the gloves in the car, the tracker bearing his fingerprint on the victim's vehicle, cell phone data placing him at the crime scene, a vehicle registered to his address, spotted by witnesses, and the fact itself: he is hiding in an attic with the murder weapon. Kucharski is charged with open murder, the most serious classification under Michigan law. This charge encompasses both first and second degree, allowing the court to determine the classification based on the proceedings. Facing the most serious charge possible, Kucharski's defense chooses the only path that might change the outcome. His attorneys request a psychiatric evaluation to assess the defendant's competency. If the evaluation finds him incompetent, a trial becomes impossible and the case is postponed indefinitely. This is a standard procedural move in such cases, and Kucharski is sent for examination. On August 22, 2023, the results are in. The evaluation concludes that Jeffrey Kucharski is competent and able to stand trial. He understands the charges against him, comprehends the consequences, and can work with his defense team. The path to delay is closed, but the attorneys do not give up. They request a second evaluation, and the court agrees. The repeat examination reaches the same conclusion: competent. The defense then makes its next move, announcing its intent to pursue an insanity defense. This is a different argument. Not that he cannot participate in trial, but that he did not understand what he was doing at the time of the crime. If the court accepts such a defense, it could mean a psychiatric facility instead of prison. For Taylor's family, each of these moves is a blow. Months of waiting, evaluations, postponed hearings. Throughout all of it, Kucharski sits in county jail while the case goes nowhere. But on March 28, 2024, the situation shifts abruptly. Kucharski's attorneys inform prosecutor Jeff Williams that they are withdrawing the insanity plea. The defense strategy they had been building for nearly a year collapses. The strategy pivots. Plea negotiations begin. Kucharski is no longer trying to prove he did not understand what he was doing. Now the question is different: on what terms he will plead guilty and what sentence he will receive. On December 11, 2024, a year and a half after Taylor's death, Jeffrey Kucharski stands before Judge Paul Bridenstine in the Kalamazoo County courtroom. He pleads guilty, but not to the most serious charge. Under the plea deal, the charge is reduced to second-degree murder. The plea agreement specifies a concrete sentencing range. Prosecutor Jeff Williams, handling the case for the county, agreed to the terms: 60 to 100 years in prison. Judge Bridenstine accepts the agreement. The sentence is announced in the courtroom: a minimum of 60 years behind bars, a maximum of 100. With credit for 415 days of pre-trial detention that Kucharski spent in county jail since his arrest. 60 years is not a conditional sentence with the possibility of early release. It is effectively a life sentence for a man barely past 30. Even with the minimum term, he will leave prison at 88 if he lives that long. Kucharski will spend the rest of his life behind bars. The judge calls the crime what it is: severe and inhumane. For Taylor's family, her mother, Cindy, her brother Morgan, her father Robert, this moment does not bring relief in the full sense of the word. Taylor is not coming back, but the sentence provides at least certainty, and the guarantee that this man will never be free again. The formal justice of a system that could not protect Taylor while she was alive now, after her death, works flawlessly. This contrast is not lost on the family or the public. At sentencing, Cindy Dragicevich steps up to the microphone. She stands in the same courtroom where her daughter was supposed to receive protection and says what she had held inside for a year and a half. The protective order they gave Taylor did not protect her. Kucharski was free to ambush Taylor despite every safeguard in place. Cindy says she is equally stunned by what the defendant did and by the fact that the system allowed it to happen. Taylor deserved better. Cindy's final words spread through local news and become headlines. Be kind, go toward people, but protect yourself, because kindness cost her her life. A sentence that in just a few words captures Taylor's entire story. A person who did everything right and trusted a system that let her down. Taylor's memory extends beyond the courtroom. In March, on the day Taylor would have turned 29, the Kalamazoo Wings hockey team holds a ceremony in her honor. Morgan, her twin brother, steps onto the ice and drops the ceremonial puck. The arena falls silent for a moment of remembrance. For Morgan, this is not a public event. It is a personal loss he is living through in front of thousands of people. After the sentencing, Cindy does not stop. She becomes an advocate for the Address Confidentiality Program launched by the state of Michigan. The program provides domestic violence victims with an official substitute address, concealing their real location. If such a program had existed and been operational sooner, Taylor might be alive. The tracker on her car might have led Kucharski nowhere. Taylor's co-workers at Wenke Greenhouses all say the same thing. The system failed her. Taylor did everything right. She left. She sought help. She obtained an order. She changed her address. And she still died in a parking lot outside her mother's home, 4 minutes away from safety. Her story is not a question of what Taylor could have done differently. It is a question of why the system that promised to protect her did not keep its promise. A backpack containing an axe, knives, and a note reading "Don't Lie" is found by police in May 2021 on a path near a stable in Duckmanton, Derbyshire. The find is classified as lost property. 6 weeks later, 23-year-old Gracie Spinks is killed at that same farm. She had warned police about a stalker 4 months earlier. Her employer had fired him. The police gave him a verbal warning and closed the case in 20 minutes. This is the story of how the system received every signal and ignored each one of them. Gracie Spinks is born on October 19, 1997, in Old Whittington, a quiet suburb of Chesterfield in the English county of Derbyshire. She grows up in an ordinary family, her father Richard, her mother Allison Ward, and her younger brother Thomas. From an early age, Gracie is drawn to water. She enrolls in Dronfield Swimming School, completes every level, and earns her qualifications as an instructor and lifeguard. At the same time, she studies art and design at Chesterfield College and occasionally models for a London agency. But Gracie's true passion is horses. She has a horse named Patty, which she keeps at a small farm called Blue Lodge Farm in the village of Duckmanton, a few miles from home. Every morning, she drives out to see him, tends to him, spends time in the paddock. It is her personal space, the place where she feels safe. In the spring of 2020, the pandemic reshapes the lives of millions across England. Gracie, as a swimming instructor, is placed on furlough. The pools are shut, and there is no work. She looks for temporary employment, and in April 2020, takes a job at the warehouse of an online retailer called X-Bite in Chesterfield. The company deals in e-commerce, and the warehouse is a hive of activity, receiving, sorting, shipping. Gracie fits in quickly. She is open, sociable, used to working with people. Her direct supervisor at the warehouse turns out to be 35-year-old Michael Sellers. He has worked at X-Bite since 2015, holding the position of supervisor, on the surface, just a regular shift manager. Gracie does not yet know that this man carries a long history that others prefer not to talk about. Over his 5 years at X-Bite, Michael Sellers leaves behind a lengthy trail. At least 8 female employees of the company complain about his behavior at various times. The pattern is always the same. Sellers singles out a colleague, begins showering her with unwanted attention, asks her on a date. One woman he invites out no fewer than 10 times. When she refuses, he does not stop. He creates a fake Instagram account to monitor her life from the shadows. Another employee quits, unable to bear the pressure. But leaving the job brings no peace. She soon notices his car parked outside her home late at night. A third woman tries to sever every connection. She changes her address, switches to a different car. Sellers still finds her. The management at X-Byte knows about the complaints. The warnings come in year after year. But the company takes no decisive action. Formal chats, reprimands, a transfer to a different shift. Sellers keeps his supervisor position, retains access to workplace systems, continues interacting with female staff. None of the 8 women go to the police. Some do not believe it will help. Others do not see his behavior as a crime. To them, he is just a weird colleague they want to keep their distance from. But behind the facade of awkward advances lies a consistent pattern: fixation on a target, inability to accept rejection, escalation when met with resistance. It is precisely this pattern that, in the spring of 2020, turns toward 22-year-old Gracie Spinks, the new hire who becomes Sellers' next target. Sellers begins singling Gracie out almost as soon as she appears at the warehouse. At first, it looks like ordinary attention from a boss. He asks about her day, offers help, looks for reasons to chat. But gradually, the line blurs. Sellers lingers at the workplace CCTV monitors, watching where Gracie is and who she is talking to. He asks a colleague to keep tabs on her and report back: who approaches her, what they talk about, who she spends her breaks with. He bombards her with messages, and the volume grows with each passing week. Gracie tries to navigate the situation gently. She does not want a conflict at work, does not want to make it into a big deal. But in December 2020, something happens that changes everything. Gracie is at home, self-isolating. Sellers shows up without warning and without an invitation. Once inside, he begins kissing her and lies on top of her. Gracie asks him to stop, and he does. But for her, this is a turning point. A few days later, on December 16th, she sends him a text message. She writes that he is a great guy, apologizes for letting him down, but says she does not have time for a relationship. She asks him to keep his distance. Sellers does not accept this answer. For him, rejection is not the end but the beginning. He does not back off, does not dial down, does not shift his attention elsewhere. On the contrary, the refusal triggers escalation. What is a clear and definitive no for Gracie becomes, for Sellers, proof that she lied about her feelings. His fixation on her only intensifies. Gracie begins to realize that words alone will not solve this problem. On January 4th, 2021, Gracie drives out to see her horse at Blue Lodge Farm. The road is familiar, refined over years. She drives it almost on autopilot, but this time, something breaks. In the parking lay-by near the turn to the farm, she spots Sellers' car. He is parked right next to the spot she comes to every morning. This is no coincidence. Sellers has never been here before. He lives in a different part of town. He has no reason to be on this road. He knows where she keeps her horse. He has tracked down her personal space. For Gracie, this is a shock. What upsets and frightens her is not just his presence, but the realization of the scale. He has crossed the boundary of the workplace. Now he knows where she goes in her free time. Gracie immediately calls X-Byte and reports the incident. This time, the company responds quickly. Sellers is suspended that same day. A formal internal investigation begins. It uncovers what management had preferred not to say out loud. 8 other female employees had experienced similar behavior from Sellers at various times. Now that everything is documented, it can no longer be ignored. On January 27, 2021, X-Byte fires Michael Sellers for gross misconduct. At the disciplinary hearing, he shows no remorse. Instead, he claims that Gracie lied about the nature of their relationship. He is convinced there was something more between them, and she is denying it. The dismissal does not extinguish his obsession. It fuels it. Now Sellers has lost his job, his daily contact with Gracie, and the structure that had at least somewhat kept him within bounds. Gracie takes the next logical step. She goes to the police. On February 4th, 2021, she dials 101, the non-emergency line for Derbyshire Police. On the recording, later played at the coroner's court, you can hear the voice of a young woman trying to explain the situation calmly and rationally. She describes Sellers as a complete weirdo, talks about his dismissal, about how he monitored her through workplace cameras. She says she is worried not just for herself, but believes something similar could happen to other women. The operator logs the report and flags it as a real and immediate risk. This is a high-priority category, one that calls for serious follow-up. The case lands with Constable Sarah Parker. She arranges a meeting with Gracie and conducts an interview lasting 45 minutes. Gracie describes Sellers' behavior in detail: the surveillance, the messages, the visit to her home in December, the appearance near the stables in January. But Parker does not take a single note during the conversation. Not one word on paper, not one entry in a report. She relies on her memory and the recording from her body-worn camera. Parker then tracks down Sellers in a car park and has a brief chat with him. The format is what is known as words of advice, a verbal warning with no formal consequences. Sellers is not arrested, not formally interviewed, not cautioned on the record. Shortly after, Parker goes on sick leave due to COVID. The recording from her body-worn camera, the only evidence of her conversation with Sellers, is automatically deleted by the system because no one flagged it as evidence. A key link in the investigation vanishes. Gracie's case moves up one level to Sergeant Matthew Adams. His job is to review the materials, assess the quality of the constable's work, and decide whether the situation requires further action. Adams spends exactly 20 minutes on this. In those 20 minutes, he reviews Parker's report, acknowledges that it is not very good and lacks detail, but closes the case anyway. Risk category: low level. Investigation complete. Later, at the coroner's court, it will become clear that in those 20 minutes, none of the steps prescribed by standard procedure for stalking cases were taken. No risk assessment was conducted, the formalized tool designed to determine the likelihood of escalation. No victim safety plan was drawn up, the document outlining specific protective measures for Gracie. No one ran Michael Sellers through the National Police Database, a check that could have revealed whether he had other complaints, warnings, or convictions on file. No one recorded why the suspect was not arrested after his identity had been established. No one considered issuing a stalking prevention order, a court order that could have legally restricted his movements and contacts. The police did not request Sellers' disciplinary file from ex-fiancée, the materials containing complaints from 8 women and documenting systematic harassment. The case was not even referred to the specialized unit, the Public Protection Unit, staffed by officers trained specifically for cases like this. Constable Parker would later say she considered requesting the disciplinary file disproportionate. Sergeant Adams would acknowledge his mistakes. But in February 2021, Gracie Spinks' complaint is closed. She did everything right. She reported it to her employer, and they acted. She went to the police, and they let her stalker walk with a verbal warning. On May 6, 2021, Anna White is walking her dog along the path near Blue Lodge Farm. On the verge, she notices a backpack. It is lying right on the trail, not hidden, not buried, just left by the track leading to the stables. White opens it and sees contents that alarm her: an axe, several knives, a hammer. Besides the tools, the backpack contains Viagra tablets and a handwritten note reading, "Don't lie." Also inside is a receipt from Marks & Spencer, dated April 29, 2021. White does not touch the contents and reports the find to Derbyshire Police. Officers respond to the scene and collect the backpack. But what happens next will later become the central charge against the police. The contents of the backpack are classified as bushcraft tools, likely left behind by someone doing forestry work. The alternative theory: lost property. The Marks & Spencer receipt is not checked. No one establishes who the backpack belongs to. No one connects the find to the open stalking case involving Gracie Spinks, despite the backpack being discovered in the immediate vicinity of the very stables where Sellers had lain in wait for her in January. Later, after the tragedy, the receipt will be traced to a relative of Sellers. The investigation will establish that, as early as March 11, 2021, he purchased 3 knives online for £325. And on that very day, May 6th, the day police collected his backpack, Sellers goes online and orders 4 more knives for £471. The police took the backpack, but never looked for its owner. Sellers simply starts over. 6 weeks pass. Gracie continues living her ordinary life. Every morning she drives out to see Paddy, tends to him, spends time in the paddock. She does not know that Sellers has not backed down. She does not know that a plan has already formed in his mind. On the night of June 17th to 18th, 2021, CCTV cameras capture movement outside Sellers' home. He walks out to his car and places a large box in the trunk. Then he gets behind the wheel and drives around the area where Gracie lives. He passes her house slowly, turns around, and heads back home. This is reconnaissance. He is checking the route, making sure he knows where she is. Early that morning, at 6:15, the camera picks him up again. Sellers carries a large bag out of his house and loads it into the car. At 6:30, he leaves home. At 6:50, his vehicle appears on Tom Lane, a narrow road leading to Blue Lodge Farm. He parks and waits. More than an hour passes. The farm is quiet, the morning just beginning. Around 7:45, Gracie leaves her home in Chesterfield. She takes the familiar route to the stables, the same route she drives nearly every day. She arrives at the farm, leaves her car, and walks to the paddock where Patty is waiting. By this point, Sellers has been at the location for over an hour. He chose this exact spot, an isolated farm, early morning, minimal witnesses. The place Gracie considers her sanctuary becomes a trap. She enters the paddock and does not see him. The time is a few minutes past 8. Between 8:03 and 8:10, Sellers attacks Gracie in the paddock near the stables. The attack is swift. Sellers inflicts multiple stab wounds. Gracie falls to the ground beside her horse. Bystanders nearby notice a man running from the paddock. Someone reaches Gracie and finds her unconscious. Emergency services are called. Paramedics arrive quickly, but the situation is already irreversible. The injuries are incompatible with life. The medics cannot stabilize her. No signs of sexual assault are found. At 8:50 on the morning of June 18, 2021, Gracie Spinks is pronounced dead. She is 23 years old. She dies in the very place she loved most, beside Patty, at the farm she visited every morning. The place where she felt safe becomes the place of her death. She did everything she could, told her employer, called the police, asked for help. The system was supposed to protect her. Her employer did its part and fired Sellers. The police failed theirs twice. They closed the stalking case, and they failed to investigate the backpack full of weapons found just steps from that paddock. Between Gracie's call to the police and her death, 4.5 months passed. Between the discovery of the backpack and the attack, 6 weeks. While paramedics try to save Gracie, police cordon off the area and begin searching the surrounding fields. Around 11 that morning, roughly 150 meters from the paddock, officers discover the body of a man. It is Michael Sellers. Coroner Matthew Cowley will later determine that Sellers took his own life. He did not wait for the police or a trial or an interrogation, taking with him all the answers to questions Gracie's family would be asking for years to come. In his bedroom, police find a suicide note. The text is brief. "I couldn't take all her lies about me." To the very end, Sellers remains in his own reality, a reality in which Gracie is the one at fault and he is the victim. The coroner will later put it precisely. Sellers removed himself from any form of accountability. His taking of his own life means there will be no criminal trial, no court, no verdict, no public proceedings in which the facts could be established and recorded as a matter of law. The only remaining procedure is the coroner's inquest. At the inquest in 2023, his father will appear. He will say that his son went downhill after being fired from X-Bite, that he withdrew, stopped communicating, lost direction. But these words explain very little. Sellers' dismissal was the consequence of his own actions. Actions he carried out systematically over many years, long before Gracie. His father describes the aftermath, but not the cause. The cause was a persistent pattern that no one stopped in time. Not the company that tolerated his behavior for years, and not the police who closed the case in 20 minutes. Derbyshire Constabulary grasps the scale of the problem almost immediately. Even before public pressure mounts, the force voluntarily refers the case to the IOPC, the Independent Office for Police Conduct, the independent body that investigates the actions of police officers. A review begins of every step, every decision, every missed signal. The IOPC investigation concludes in May 2022. The findings are damning. 5 Derbyshire police officers received misconduct notices, 2 of them, Constable Sarah Parker and Sergeant Matthew Adams, for their handling of Gracie's stalking complaint. Parker kept no notes, did not preserve the video, failed to ensure a formal interview of the suspect. Adams closed the case in 20 minutes without conducting a single mandatory check. 3 more officers, a sergeant and 2 constables, are cited for their handling of the backpack found in May. They classified an axe, knives, a hammer, Viagra, and a note reading, "Don't lie," as lost property, and made no attempt to identify the owner. The IOPC identifies systemic failures. The case should have been referred to the Public Protection Unit from the very start. Local officers did not know that stalking complaints require a specialized approach. Procedures existed on paper, but did not work in practice. In November 2022, a disciplinary hearing takes place. It is chaired by a senior officer from a different police force to avoid any conflict of interest. After reviewing the evidence, the charges against all 5 are found not proven. None of the officers face formal consequences. For Gracie's family, this is yet another failure. The system that could not protect their daughter while she was alive cannot hold accountable those who allowed her death. The disciplinary hearing does not put an end to things. In October 2023, the coroner's inquest into the death of Gracie Spinks begins. The hearings take place at the Chesterfield Coroner's Court and last several weeks. Dozens of witnesses appear before the jury: police officers, colleagues from Expite, medics, forensic experts, and relatives from both sides. At the inquest, facts that had remained behind closed doors are heard for the first time. CCTV footage tracking Sellers' movements on the night before the attack. Records of his online purchases. 7 knives over a span of months, totaling nearly 800 pounds. The contents of the backpack that police wrote off as lost property. Detective Superintendent Darren Diath stands before Gracie's family and says what they have waited 2.5 years to hear. Put simply, we as a force let Gracie down, and for that I can only offer my sincere apologies on my behalf and on behalf of the constabulary. The jury delivers a unanimous verdict: unlawful killing. In a separate narrative conclusion, the jury records serious failings by Derbyshire police at every stage. Coroner Matthew Cowley goes further. He issues a prevention of future deaths report, addressed to Derbyshire police and the Home Secretary. It identifies 6 areas of concern. Cowley notes that stalking victims in the United Kingdom face a postcode lottery, where the level of protection depends on where they happen to live. Derbyshire, in the wake of Gracie's case, introduced dedicated stalking advocates. But in most other regions, such specialists still do not exist. Gracie's family does not stop at the inquest. Richard Spinks and Alison Ward launch a campaign they call Gracie's Law. Their central demand: that every stalking victim in the United Kingdom should have access to a specialized advocate who accompanies the case from the first police report through to trial. Not a formal procedure, but a real person who understands how the system works and ensures a complaint does not drown in bureaucracy. The parents draw a comparison to the case of Jill Dando, the television presenter killed in 1999, and say that in a quarter of a century, nothing fundamental has changed. In April 2024, ITV airs a documentary called Stalking State of Fear. It features recordings of Gracie's calls to the police, CCTV footage, and interviews with her family and experts. The film becomes part of a broader wave of pressure on the system. The Susie Lamploge Trust, a charity named after another stalking victim, files what is known as a super complaint, a formal grievance about systemic problems in how police handle stalking. In September 2024, 3 key bodies, the IOPC, His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, HMI, CFRS, and the College of Policing, publish a joint report. Its conclusion is unequivocal: the stalking law needs to change. In December 2024, the UK government announces a package of reforms. Stalking protection orders, the court-issued restrictions placed on stalkers, are expanded. Courts are given the power to issue them alongside any sentence. Mandatory training for police officers on handling stalking cases is introduced. Victims are given the right to know the identity of those who stalk them online. The story of Gracie Spinks, a girl from Derbyshire who loved horses, worked as a lifeguard, and did everything right, becomes the catalyst for the most sweeping reform of stalking legislation in modern British history. On the 15th of February 2020, the night after Valentine's Day, the Los Angeles police find a woman beneath a third-floor balcony of a home in the Hollywood Hills. Her neck bears signs of an attack. Inside the house, a syringe filled with poison. Amie Harwick, a Hollywood therapist and former fiancée of Drew Carey, had done everything experts recommend for victims of stalking. She left. She reported it to police. She got a restraining order. The order expired, but the threat did not. How could a woman who spent 10 years helping others recognize dangerous relationships fail to escape her own? On the 20th of May, 1981, in the small town of Sellersville, Pennsylvania, a baby girl is born who will soon be adopted by Tom and Penny Harwick. They live in Lansdale, a quiet suburb about 25 miles north of Philadelphia, where everyone knows each other and doors stay unlocked until dark. Amie Nicole Harwick grows up in a loving family, attends the local North Penn High School, and graduates in 1999. She is 18, and she knows one thing for certain. Lansdale is too small for her ambitions. In 2001, Amie boards a plane to Los Angeles. She has no connections, no contacts, no plan, just determination. In those early years, she takes on anything and everything: personal trainer, dancer, bartender, model. She pays the rent while studying on the side. First, a bachelor's degree in psychology from Cal Poly Pomona. Then, a master's at the prestigious Pepperdine University in clinical psychology. Then, a doctoral degree from the Institute for Advanced Study of Human Sexuality. Step by step, Amie builds herself an entirely different life. She opens a private practice in West Hollywood and becomes a licensed marriage and sex therapist. Her clients are people from the entertainment industry, Hollywood couples, those who need a professional who won't judge. In 2014, Amie publishes a book called The New Sex Bible for Women, a guide to mindfulness and intimacy. She appears on podcasts, gives interviews, shows up on television. At the same time, she works with Pineapple Support, a nonprofit that provides free mental health services to adult industry workers. Amie builds a career dedicated to helping others navigate the most complex aspects of relationships. But in her own life, a situation is brewing that no degree and no professional skill can help her handle. Around 2009, Gareth Pursehouse enters Amie's life. A software engineer, photographer, aspiring comedian, he comes across as creative and well-rounded. They start dating, and at first, everything looks normal, but gradually, Pursehouse changes. Behind the charming exterior is a man who wants to control Amie's every move. Control turns into aggression, and aggression turns into outright physical violence. In May of 2011, Amie files a police report. In it, she describes what had been happening behind closed doors. Pursehouse had been systematically abusing her physically. Amie is a therapist. She understands the dynamics of destructive relationships better than most people. She knows the terminology, knows the patterns, knows that abuse works in cycles. But knowledge does not equal protection. In June of 2011, things escalate to a new level. Pursehouse shoves Amie out of a moving car. She is injured and calls 911. 4 days later, on June 22nd, Amie files her first request for a restraining order. The court reviews the petition and denies it. The stated reason: no charges filed. The system she turned to for help fails her on the first try. A woman who professionally helps people build healthy relationships cannot get basic legal protection from a man who regularly causes her physical harm. The denial does not stop Amie, but Pursehouse does not stop either. In 2012, Amie files a second request for a restraining order. This time, the court grants it. The document requires Pursehouse to keep his distance, not to approach her, not to make contact. On paper, it looks like a solution. There is an official document, there is legal force, there are consequences for violations. Amie finally gets what she asked for, but Pursehouse sees the order differently. He sends Amie a text message: "It will get worse." She calls the police again. Technically, the order works. Pursehouse does not show up at her door and does not approach her on the street. Amie ends the relationship for good and tries to return to a normal life. She keeps building her practice, sees clients, makes public appearances. From the outside, it looks like the page has been turned, but the digital world knows no distance. Pursehouse continues the stalking online, messages, attempts to reach her through third parties, monitoring her social media. The stalking does not stop, it just changes form. The restraining order lasts 3 years and expires in 2015. Amie does not file for renewal. Maybe she decides the threat has passed. Maybe she is tired of the legal battle. Maybe she just wants to finally draw a line and stop looking over her shoulder. Whatever the reason, from 2015 on, there is no legal barrier standing between Amie and Purse House. The protection system, which was already working intermittently, stops working altogether. But Purse House does not disappear. He lives in the same city, attends the same events, photographs the same red carpets, and he keeps thinking about Amie. In the summer of 2017, Amie ends up at a Hollywood party where she is bartending that evening. Among the guests is Carey, the host of one of the highest-rated shows in America. The Price is Right. They talk, and there is a chemistry between them that both will later call instant. Carey is a man from a completely different world, a stand-up comedian turned national celebrity whose face is familiar to every American who has ever turned on daytime television. They start dating, and in January of 2018, they announce their engagement. Amie transforms from a respected but niche specialist into a public figure. Her name pops up in tabloids. Her photos appear on society pages. On a special Valentine's Day episode of The Price is Right in 2018, Carey introduces Amie to millions of viewers as his fiancée. For Amie, this is a time when life is finally coming together the way she dreamed. Professional success, love, recognition. But by the end of 2018, the couple splits. The breakup is amicable. Both will later emphasize that. Carey, however, will call it painful, like a death. He later tells reporters that he suspected Purse House was becoming increasingly unhinged, with every publication about their romance. Every headline, every red carpet photo, every mention of Amie's name alongside a celebrity's. For Purse House, it was a reminder of the woman he considered his. Despite the breakup with Carey, Amie does not slow down. She continues her practice, appears on podcasts, provides expert commentary for TV networks. Her professional reputation only grows stronger. But in the shadow of this new life, the old threat has not vanished. It is simply waiting for the right moment. On January 16, 2020, that moment arrives. Amie attends the XBI's awards ceremony in Los Angeles, a prestigious event in the adult industry, with which she is professionally connected through her work with Pineapple Support. She does not know that Gareth Purse House is also there. He is working as a photographer on the red carpet, shooting celebrities at the entrance. 8 years earlier, Amie obtained an order that was supposed to permanently remove this man from her life. Now, only a few feet separate them. Purse House spots her first. He approaches, and what happens next is witnessed by about 100 people. He screams in her face, "You ruined my life! Why are you here? You shouldn't be here." He sobs, clutches his head, hyperventilates. 8 years of silence, and all the accumulated obsession pours out in minutes. Amie reacts like a professional. She uses the de-escalation techniques she teaches her own clients. She tries to calm him down, lower the intensity. But the incident leaves her deeply shaken. After the event, Amie sits down at her computer and writes a detailed account of what happened in an email to document it, to preserve it, just in case. Purse House does not stop at one confrontation. He begins calling her, leaving voicemails where he sobs into the phone, again and again. Amie changes her phone number. She blocks him everywhere she can. The prosecution will later argue at trial that this blocking was the final trigger. For 8 years, Purse House had lived under the illusion that the connection still existed. When Amie cut the last channel, he was left with nothing but obsession and rage. After the encounter at the XBI's awards, Amie's life does not change on the surface. She sees clients, appears on podcasts, meets with friends, but internally, something shifts. She starts researching home security camera systems for her house in the Hollywood Hills. She buys pepper spray. She tells her closest friends that she feels she is in danger. Amie does not know exactly what Purse House is planning, but her professional intuition is sounding the alarm. She is a therapist who spent years working with victims of destructive relationships. She knows how escalation works. She knows that silence after an outburst does not mean safety. It often means preparation. 1 week passes, then 2, then 3. Purse House stops calling and texting. The blocking worked, or so it seems. The The prosecution will later present evidence that during those very 4 weeks, Pursehouse is planning the attack. He studies Amie's house, prepares his tools, chooses the date. On February 13th, the day before Valentine's Day, Amie unexpectedly reaches out to Drew Carey. They had barely spoken since their breakup at the end of 2018. The message is short and warm. "I want to get together and talk." Carey responds immediately. "Yes, I would like that. I love you." They agree to meet. Carey will later say, "Before I could talk to her, someone took her away." This is the last exchange of messages between Amie and the man who wanted to become her husband. The meeting they planned is only a few days away, but Amie no longer has those days. February 14th, 2020, Valentine's Day. Amie spends the evening the way she loves, surrounded by friends. The group heads to the Globe Theater for a burlesque show put on by impresario Miss Tosh, a celebration for everyone, for those in relationships and for those who are single. Amie puts on her favorite necklace, a string of rosary beads that she wears practically every day. The hall is filled with music, laughter, and vibrant performances. Amie takes photos with friends, cheers on the performers, feels completely in her element. Nothing in her behavior hints at the anxiety she had confided to close friends just weeks earlier. After the show, the group decides to skip the official after-party. Instead, they head to a bar called Nomad, where they drink tea and talk. Time slips by unnoticed. Past midnight, Amie texts Robert Koshland, one of her closest friends. They discuss an upcoming trip together, make plans. Koshland sends his last message around 11 at night. Amie replies at 1:01 in the morning, already the 15th of February. It is the last message she will ever send. The group disperses. Amie drives home to her 3-story house in the Hollywood Hills, where she has lived for several years. On the first floor, her housemate Michael Herman is asleep. He went to bed early and heard nothing until he is woken by a sound resembling a plate shattering somewhere above him. He assumes Amie has come home and falls back asleep. It will later turn out that the sound was not caused by Amie. That sound is not a plate, and it is not Amie. While she is out having fun with friends at the Globe Theater, Gareth Pursehouse approaches her house. Surveillance cameras on a neighboring property will capture his every step. The footage shows a man crossing the neighbor's yard and climbing over the fence into Amie's backyard. Then, he walks up to a camera and tries to cover or turn it away, but the recording is already running. Pursehouse finds the French doors on the first floor and smashes a glass panel. Shards scatter across the floor, and it is precisely this sound, around 12:30 in the morning, that wakes Michael Herman. But he assumes it is Amie and falls back asleep. Investigators will later determine that was the moment of entry. Pursehouse enters the house and climbs to the 3rd floor. He waits. In his pocket or nearby is a syringe filled with a yellowish-brown liquid. When the forensic lab examines the contents, the syringe will be found to contain a lethal dose of liquid nicotine. During a subsequent search of Purshouse's home, police will find a matching syringe, a second one, identical to the first. The prosecution will interpret this as evidence that the attack was premeditated, systematic, and deliberate. This is not a burst of rage, not an impulsive act. This is the result of a month of planning. The man came prepared, chose the night after Valentine's Day, waited for the victim to leave the house, broke down the door, and sat down to wait. Pursehouse sits in the darkness on the 3rd floor of a house where, on the 1st floor, an unsuspecting person sleeps peacefully, and he waits for Amie to come home. Around 1 in the morning, Amie enters her house. She goes up to the 3rd floor to her bedroom and at some point comes face to face with Pursehouse. What exactly happens in the first seconds, no one knows. The only other person in the house is 2 floors below. But what Michael Herman hears leaves no doubt. He is jolted awake by a scream. Herman calls out into the darkness, "Amie!" Immediately after, he hears the sounds of a struggle. The struggle moves through the house. Investigators will later reconstruct the path using scattered rosary beads from the very necklace Amie had put on for the burlesque show just hours before. The beads trail in a line from the living room through the bedroom and end on the 3rd floor balcony. On the floor near the shattered French doors, blood stains. DNA analysis will later show that it is Purshouse's blood. Amie fights back. She is fighting for her life. The prosecutor will tell the jury at trial that the marks on Purshouse's face and body are direct evidence that Amie resisted. But Pursehouse is physically stronger. He strangles her, then throws her from the balcony, a fall from the third floor, roughly 20 feet. The autopsy will record 2 causes of death: injuries from the fall and strangulation. Michael Herman leaps out of bed in a panic. He heard a scream, heard a struggle, heard silence. Now he needs a phone, but he cannot find it. Precious minutes are lost as he stumbles around a dark room searching for his cell. Herman runs out of the house barefoot and knocks on the neighbor's door. No one answers. The Hollywood Hills is a neighborhood of expensive mansions scattered across hillsides, and the distances between houses feel insurmountable at night. Herman runs down the street and spots a stranger with a cell phone. He grabs the stranger's phone and dials 911. His voice on the recorded call is the voice of a man who just heard his neighbor being attacked and could do nothing about it. "I was downstairs. I heard screaming. I know she was attacked. I heard her hit the ground." At 1:11 in the morning, officers arrive at the address in the Hollywood Hills and find Amie Harwick lying unconscious in the yard, directly below the third-floor balcony. Her neck bears signs of assault. Paramedics begin resuscitation and load Amie into an ambulance. She is rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, one of the best hospitals in Los Angeles. Doctors do everything they can, but the injuries are too severe. At 3:26 in the morning on February 15th, 2020, Amie Nicole Harwick is pronounced dead. She is 38 years old. Between her last text message to a friend and the arrival of police, 10 minutes pass. Between the arrival of police and her death, just over 2 hours. While doctors fight for Amie's life, LAPD detectives get to work. They call in the victim's closest friends to the station, and the first to arrive is Robert Koshland, the same friend Amie texted her last message to at 1:01 in the morning. The detectives ask, "Is there anyone who might have wanted to harm Amie?" Koshland does not hesitate for a second. He names a name: Gareth Pursehouse. He tells them about the confrontation at the XBI's Awards a month earlier, about the years of stalking, about the restraining orders. Detectives begin reviewing surveillance cameras around Amie's house. The neighbor's camera that Pursehouse tried to turn away recorded enough. A man climbs over a fence, crosses a yard, approaches the house. Forensic technicians collect blood samples from the floor near the shattered French doors. The LAPD lab runs a DNA analysis. The result is unambiguous. The blood belongs to Gareth Pursehouse. On February 15th, after 4 in the afternoon, less than 15 hours after the attack, police arrest Pursehouse near his home. At the time of his arrest, he shows visible signs of a struggle. But then, something unexpected happens. Pursehouse is released on $2 million bail. A man accused of a fatal assault walks free just hours after his arrest. 4 days later, on February 19th, prosecutors secure a second arrest, this time with no bail. Pursehouse is charged on 2 counts: first-degree murder with the special circumstance of lying in wait, and first-degree residential burglary with a person present. Each of these counts carries the maximum penalty. 3.5 years pass. Throughout this time, Pursehouse sits in county jail with no bail. In August of 2023, the trial begins. The case is heard in a Los Angeles courtroom under the cameras of Court TV, which broadcasts the proceedings live. The prosecution builds its case systematically and methodically. Prosecutor Victor Avila presents the jury with surveillance footage, DNA analysis results, photographs of the nicotine-filled syringe, and witness testimony. Avila argues that Pursehouse acted out of obsession and rage, and that the choice of the night after Valentine's Day was intentional, a statement. A separate chapter of the trial focuses on Amie's emails and text messages. The prosecution reads them aloud in the courtroom, and the effect is powerful. It is as if Amie is testifying from beyond the grave. Her own words describe the fear she experienced, document the threats, record the confrontation at the XBIZ Awards. Her voice, captured in emails, fills the courtroom 3 years after her death. Then it is the defense's turn. And what happens next catches everyone off guard. Purshouse's attorneys do not call a single witness. They present no evidence. They construct no alternative theory of events. Pursehouse refuses to testify. The only argument the defense puts forward, the syringe filled with nicotine, was intended for Pursehouse himself, not for Amie. On September 29, 2023, the jury retires to deliberate. They need 8 hours. The verdict, guilty on all counts. On December 6th, the judge hands down the sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole. The court also orders restitution in the amount of $7,500. Pursehouse is 45 years old. He will spend the rest of his life behind bars. The sentence closes the legal chapter of the case, but the questions it raises remain unanswered. Drew Carey steps before reporters and says what he feels. "I feel like a widower. I think about her every day." He shares that Amie's death destroyed him, that it changed his understanding of relationships and intimacy. He recalls that last message, "I want to get together and talk," and the meeting that never happened. Amie's parents, Tom and Penny Harwick of Lansdale, lose the daughter they adopted, raised, and sent out into the world. They become activists. They speak publicly. They tell Amie's story. They demand stronger stalking and domestic harassment laws. 2 days after Amie's death, a petition called Justice for Amie appears on change.org, gathering thousands of signatures calling for reform of protective order legislation. The case attracts attention from major media outlets. CBS produces a special 48 Hours episode titled Justice for Amie Harwick. Oxygen dedicates an episode of a documentary series to her, and Court TV broadcasts every day of the trial. But the central question this story leaves behind is not about one specific perpetrator or one specific victim. Amie Harwick did everything the experts recommend. She left a destructive relationship, she went to the police, she obtained a restraining order, she blocked her stalker. She was educated, financially independent, surrounded by friends, and professionally understood the mechanics of destructive behavior. And she still died. The restraining order expired, and between her and the threat, all that remained was her own vigilance. In the 5 years after the order expired, Pursehouse was never once charged, but his obsession never went away. It was simply waiting for a trigger. A 23-year-old student from Kent went to the police to report her ex-boyfriend for stalking. She gave his name, described his behavior, and asked for protection. The police called him and asked him to stop. 2 days later, he bought a knife at a supermarket. 2 days after that, he showed up at her gym, waited for her to walk to her car, and attacked her with the knife. Molly McLaren did everything women are taught to do. She recognized the threat, reached out for help, warned her loved ones. The story of why that wasn't enough doesn't begin in 2017 or in Kent. It begins 4 years earlier, in a different county, with a different woman and the same man. In 2013, in the town of Stoke-on-Trent, Staffordshire, a young woman named Alexandra Dale decides to go to the police. She tells a story that, at the time, seems unremarkable. A man she went on one date with won't leave her alone. His name is Joshua Stimpson. He's 22 years old, and he acts as though one date gave him rights over her entire life. He follows Alexandra to nightclubs, secretly photographs her, shows up in unexpected places, sends strange messages. One of them sounds particularly ominous. When you get home, there'll be a surprise waiting for you. Alexandra returns home to find all 4 tires on her mother's car slashed. She knows who did it, but there's no direct evidence. When she goes on holiday, hoping for a break from the nightmare, another message arrives. "I'll fly out and drown you." Alexandra shows all the messages to the police. She expects the system to respond, an investigation to be launched, this person to finally appear on law enforcement's radar. But Staffordshire police don't register her complaint as a crime. There isn't enough direct evidence for the property damage, and the officer assesses the threats in the messages as falling below the criminal threshold. The solution is simple. Stimpson receives a text message warning. Stay away. That's it. No interview, no report, no entry in the database. Joshua Stimpson remains clean. No record, no flag in the system, no trace that would allow other officers in another county, years later, to know who they were dealing with. Staffordshire closes the page. Stimpson moves away. 4 years later, his name will surface in Kent, in a completely different context, but the pattern will remain the same. Surveillance, control, threats, escalating obsession. With one difference, next time, a text warning won't be enough. Summer of 2016. In the small town of Cobham, Kent, 22-year-old Molly McLaren is scrolling through a dating app. Molly is a second-year student at the University of Kent, studying sport and exercise science. She's passionate about fitness, goes to the gym regularly, and runs a blog where she talks with disarming honesty about her struggle with an eating disorder. Years of a difficult relationship with her own body taught her one thing: tell the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it is. Her followers know her as a girl who isn't afraid to show vulnerability and turns her own experience into support for others. Body acceptance, moving forward, the right to be imperfect. Molly graduated from Mayfield Grammar School in Gravesend, then North Kent College in Dartford. Now she lives with her parents in Cobham, her mother Joanna, her father Douglas, and her brother Tom. The family is close, the relationship's warm, the home a solid anchor. In July 2016, a match happens on Tinder. Joshua Stimpson, 25, works at a warehouse, recently moved to Kent from Staffordshire. On screen, he looks like a regular guy. Open smile, simple interests, nothing suspicious. They message for several months. The conversations are light, jokes, sharing snapshots of everyday life. Nothing alarming. In the autumn, Molly and Joshua finally meet in person and start a relationship. For Molly, it's a new chapter, a new boyfriend, new emotions, a sense of normalcy she'd been waiting for. Neither she nor her family nor her friends know that the person sitting across from her has a history. That 4 years earlier, in another county, another woman went to the police about his stalking, that he slashed tires on someone's car, threatened physical harm, was warned and released without a single entry in the database. Staffordshire police didn't pass on any information because there was nothing to pass on. For Molly and for Kent's entire system, Joshua Stimpson starts with a clean slate. The first months of the relationship pass without visible problems. Molly and Joshua spend time together, go to the movies, take walks, look like any ordinary young couple. But gradually, cracks begin to appear in Stimpson's behavior. Small things at first: unexplained jealousy, sharp mood swings, the need to know every detail of her day. Then, the control becomes more overt. At a family party at the McLarens, Molly sends her mother a message: "Come to the room, he's playing up again." Joanna goes upstairs and finds her daughter nervous, upset. It turns out Stimpson had been recording Molly on video without her consent. Not as a joke, not for a fun social media clip. He was documenting her behavior as if collecting material he could use later. This was no accidental press of the record button. Molly starts telling those close to her that she feels like she's constantly walking on eggshells around him. Any conversation can turn into a conflict. Every detail of her life is subjected to interrogation. She calls his behavior childish. But behind that soft word lies something far more serious: pressure that intensifies with each passing week. They broke up briefly a few times. Molly tried to pull away to give herself space, but each time, Stimpson pulled her back. Apologies, promises to change, the appearance of remorse. The cycle repeated, and with each turn, Molly saw more clearly that the person in front of her was not the one she'd met on Tinder. Over 7 months, the facade of a happy relationship grows thinner and thinner. Those close to her notice that Molly has changed. She's become more anxious, withdrawn, careful with her words. But she still hopes it's temporary, that Joshua is just going through a rough patch and things will get better. That if she's patient enough, he'll become the person he seemed to be at the start. Until one day she decides she's no longer willing to wait, that she's had enough, and that the only way out is to end the relationship for good. Around June 17, 2017, Molly draws the line. This time with no caveats, no "let's take a break," no hope for change. The relationship is over. She tells Stimpson she doesn't want to see him anymore. 12 days. That's exactly how long separates this moment from the end. Stimpson's reaction comes fast, and it's not private, it's public. He goes on Facebook and starts posting about Molly. Abusive language, humiliating comments, false claims. Among other things, he alleges that Molly was using drugs. It's not true, but Stimpson doesn't need the truth. He needs her reputation damaged. He needs people to see not the Molly they know, but the one he's painting in his posts. He methodically destroys her image in the eyes of mutual acquaintances and followers. But the public harassment is only the visible part. At the same time, Stimpson builds a surveillance system that operates without his physical presence. Through Tinder, he'd previously matched with a girl he never actually met in person. Now, he uses that contact. The acquaintance begins monitoring Molly's Instagram account and feeding Stimson information. Where she is, who she's with, what she's doing. Every post becomes a beacon. Every geotagged photo becomes a clue. Molly continues living her normal life, posting pictures, sharing moments with friends. She doesn't yet realize that every post she makes is now being read by the person she's trying to distance herself from. That her own social media is working against her. That the distance she created exists only in her mind. For Stimson, the breakup doesn't mean the end. It means the beginning of a new phase, where control is no longer constrained by the framework of a relationship. Before, he watched her as a boyfriend. Now, he watches as an outsider with nothing to lose. And Molly cannot yet fully grasp the scale of this surveillance. The scale of what's happening becomes clear to Molly fairly quickly. The abusive Facebook posts don't stop, and then something happens that shatters any remaining illusion of safety. Molly spends an evening with friends at the Ship and Trades pub. She takes a photo and posts it on Instagram, tagging the location. A short time later, Stimson appears at the same venue, with another girl deliberately, but at the exact spot where Molly is. This is no coincidence. The Tinder informant did her job. Molly posted her location, the acquaintance related to Stimson, and he immediately drove over. Molly understands she is being systematically watched. She decides to seek help from the place women are told to go in situations like this, the police. Together with her mother, Joanna, Molly goes to the North Kent police station. She tells them about the social media posts, the false accusations, the appearance at the bar, the growing sense of being stalked. The officer listens, assesses the situation, and makes a decision. He calls Stimson right there, on speakerphone, in front of them. The warning is clear: stop the harassment, or you will face consequences. Stimson listens. The call ends. And so does the visit to the station. No restraining order, no arrest, no formal prohibition on contact. Not a single document creating a legal barrier between Stimson and Molly. Molly leaves the station feeling she did the right thing, that the system now knows and will act if anything happens again. But all Stimson got was a phone call. The very same tool that Staffordshire police had used 4 years earlier to try to stop him in the Alexandra Dale case. It didn't work then. A text warning didn't stop Stimson in 2013. A phone warning won't stop him in 2017. The only difference is that this time, the consequences will be irreversible. On June 27, 2017, Kent police contact Stimson again. This is already the second warning in a short span of time. He's told once more, stop or there will be serious consequences. Stimson listens and hangs up. That same day, around 5 in the afternoon, he walks into an Asda supermarket in Chatham. The security camera above the register captures the moment of purchase. A Sabatier kitchen knife, small with a thin blade designed for peeling vegetables. Stimson pays and walks out. The footage will become one of the key pieces of evidence at trial. A calm face, confident movements, no rush. A man who knows exactly why he's there. Half an hour later, Stimson appears at a home-based store on the same street. There, he buys a Saxon pickaxe. Between the second police warning and the purchase of a weapon, only a few hours pass. The knife's packaging will later be found at his home. The pickaxe will remain in the trunk of his car. Neither item is ever used for any household purpose. The next day, June 28th, Stimson appears near Molly again. She's spending the evening with friends at a bar, and he shows up. By this point, being stalked has become part of her daily life. She writes to friends on WhatsApp, "I feel like I'm constantly looking over my shoulder." That phrase will become one of the last messages of hers that the court reads out 6 months later. Molly is living in a state of constant anxiety. She went to the police, warned her family, distanced herself from Stimson. She did everything she was told to do, but the knife has already been bought, and Molly doesn't know it. 48 hours separate the purchase from what will happen in the parking lot of a shopping center in Chatham. 48 hours during which Stimson keeps the knife and waits for his moment. 48 hours during which the system, warned twice, does nothing. June 29th, 2017 begins like an ordinary Thursday. A sunny morning in Chatham, people driving to work, shops opening at the Dockside Outlet Shopping Center. Molly McLaren arrives for a workout at Pure Gym, located on the complex's grounds. She parks her Citroen C2 and heads up to the gym. Working out has long been more than just a habit for Molly. It's a way of maintaining balance, part of her recovery, her daily ritual of normal life. She steps onto a machine and begins exercising. After a while, Molly spots him. Stimson hasn't just wandered into the same gym. He deliberately walks over and gets on the machine right next to hers. Molly immediately pulls out her phone and texts her mother, "Mom, he's come to the gym and got on the machine right next to me." Joanna responds instantly, "Leave, right now, drive home." Molly doesn't argue. She knows her mother is right. She knows it's dangerous to be near this person. She stops her workout, gathers her things, and at 11:01 leaves Pure Gym. She walks down the corridor, descends to the parking lot, passes between rows of cars to her little Citroen, gets behind the wheel, maybe dials a number, maybe fastens her seatbelt. Stimson leaves the gym right after her. His father's car, a Peugeot, is parked in the lot. He gets behind the wheel, drives between the rows, and parks in the adjacent lane, opposite Molly's car. Gets out, walks toward her car. Between the message to her mother and what will happen in the next few minutes, very little time passes. Molly is in the car. Stimson is approaching. 12 days of stalking after the breakup, 2 police warnings, a knife bought 48 hours earlier, dozens of alarm signals that no one truly acted on. Everything converges at a single point on a sun-drenched parking lot outside a shopping center on an ordinary Thursday. Stimson approaches Molly's Citroen and yanks open the driver's side door. In his hand is the Sabatier knife, the same one purchased 2 days earlier at Asda. Molly is behind the wheel. She's buckled in and can neither jump out nor slide over to the passenger seat. Stimson begins stabbing. Molly tries to defend herself, but she's strapped in and physically cannot break free. She leans on the horn, and a continuous blare rings out across the shopping center parking lot. The sound draws the attention of passers-by. People turn, see the open car door, a figure hunched over the driver's seat. One of them, Ben Morton, who came there to give his wife a ride to the cinema and walk the dog, rushes to the car. He tries to slam the door onto Stimson's leg to stop him. The door bounces back. Morton grabs Stimson's leg, tries to drag him away, but he cannot stop the attack. Within minutes, the assault is over. Molly sustains multiple stab wounds and loses consciousness behind the wheel of her own car, in the parking lot where she came to work out. At 11:43, she is pronounced dead. She was 23 years old. Stimson doesn't try to run. He's detained right there, in the parking lot, in blood-soaked clothing. The dockside outlet security cameras capture everything: his arrival, his movements across the lot, his arrest. On the driver's seat of Molly's car lies the knife. At Stimson's home lies the knife's packaging. In the trunk of his car lies the pickaxe, purchased on the same evening. Everything planned, everything prepared. Molly had texted her mother just minutes before it happened. She was asking for help. She was doing everything right, but between doing the right thing and actual protection lay a chasm that no one managed to bridge in time. January 2018. The Maidstone Crown Court Building, Kent. On the defendant's bench sits 26-year-old Joshua Stimson. He doesn't deny delivering the blows, doesn't deny buying the knife in advance, doesn't deny going to the gym after Molly and following her to the parking lot. His defense rests on a single argument. He was not fully mentally competent at the time of the attack. The defense asks for the charge to be reduced from murder to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. To support this position, they call psychiatrist Dr. Shahid Majid. His conclusion: Stimson has a severe emotionally unstable and borderline personality disorder. In Majid's opinion, the defendant understood what he was doing but could not fully control his actions. The prosecution calls its own expert. Dr. Philip Joseph reaches the opposite conclusion. He finds no recognized medical disorder. These are personality traits, not a disorder, he tells the jury. Before them are 2 specialists with opposing diagnoses. But prosecutor Philip Bennett brings the jury back to the facts that require no psychiatric interpretation. Security camera footage, a calm purchase of the knife at Asda, the purchase of a pickaxe at home base half an hour later, stalking Molly across the parking lot. Between the police phone warning on June 27th and the knife purchase that same day, only a few hours passed. This is not a burst of passion. This is a sequence of deliberate actions stretched across 2 days. The prosecution builds a clear chain. the police warning, the purchase of weapons on the same day, the appearance at the bar the next day, the appearance at the gym the day after, the attack in the parking lot. Each step follows the previous one with chilling logic. This is not the chaotic behavior of a man who lost control. This is a plan, unfolded day by day. The jury must decide, is the man before them someone overwhelmed by emotion, or someone who coldly planned every step on the path to the shopping center parking lot? The jury retires to deliberate. 8 men and 4 women close the door of the deliberation room behind them. An hour passes, then 2, then 3. In less than 4 hours, they return with a verdict, unanimous. Guilty of murder. The diminished responsibility defense is rejected. For the jury, the picture was clear enough. The purchase of a weapon 2 days prior, systematic stalking, the appearance at the gym, surveillance across the parking lot. Every element points to preparation, not loss of control. Judge Adele Williams reads the sentence: life imprisonment with a minimum term of 26 years. Before Stimson is led away, she addresses him directly. "This was a brutal, calculated, and cowardly act," she says, every word measured, each one resonating in the silence of the courtroom. "You deliberately took Molly's life. You were determined to punish her for ending the relationship with you. You sought revenge." The judge pauses and continues. "You are an extremely dangerous young man. You will pose a significant risk to women for a very long time into the future." These are not standard sentencing words. This is a warning directed not only at Stimson, but at everyone who will one day decide whether he should ever be released. Judge Williams adds, he may never walk free. Separately, she recommends Ben Morton for a bravery award, for trying to stop the attack at the risk of his own life. The High Sheriff of Kent presents Morton with an award and a check for £500. At the ceremony, Molly's parents, Joanna and Douglas McLaren, are present. For the first time, they can personally thank the man who tried to save their daughter. In the courtroom, a sentence is pronounced that puts a legal full stop on the case. But for the McLaren family, it's not the end. It's the beginning of questions the court never examined. Why a system, warned twice, failed to prevent what happened in a parking lot on an ordinary Thursday. The sentence closes the criminal case, but opens another question: how the system allowed a man with a documented history of stalking to bring a situation to its extreme conclusion without interference. After the trial, a review of law enforcement actions is conducted. The Domestic Homicide Review, an independent investigation examining the circumstances of the death, delivers a harsh finding. Staffordshire police failed in the 2013 investigation. Alexandra Dale's report of stalking, threats, and property damage was never registered as a crime. The officer sent a text warning and closed the case without creating a report or a database entry. If 4 years earlier Alexandra's complaint had been properly recorded, Stimson would have been in the system. When Molly went to Kent Police in 2017, the officer could have seen his history, could have assessed the threat level differently, could have issued a restraining order, initiated an arrest, launched a risk assessment procedure, but there was nothing to pass on. Stimson remained invisible to the system. In 2016, Staffordshire Police changed its policy. From then on, stalking cases would be registered as crimes, even if the victim didn't wish to pursue the matter. It was the right step. But for Molly, it came too late. Kent Police didn't fare any better under scrutiny. 2 reports from Molly, 2 verbal warnings to Stimson. Not a single real action. No restraining order, no arrest, no risk assessment, no check of his background in other counties. Molly did everything women are taught to do in situations like these. She recognized the threat. She sought help from law enforcement. She warned her family. She tried to distance herself. The system received her signal and responded with a phone call, the very same tool that had already proven useless 4 years earlier, in a different county, with a different woman, with the same man. 2 counties, 2 women, 2 identical responses. And one outcome that could have been avoided if even a single link in the chain had worked differently. A phone call didn't protect Molly, but her story sets in motion processes that extend far beyond a single criminal case in Kent. Molly's parents, Joanna and Douglas McLaren, make a decision. Their daughter's name will not remain only in court archives. They establish the Molly McLaren Foundation. But the foundation isn't dedicated to fighting stalking, as one might expect. It's dedicated to what Molly lived for, helping people with eating disorders. her blog, her honest account of her own recovery journey, her drive to support those going through the same thing. The foundation funds training for school teachers to recognize early signs of eating disorders, works with doctors to ensure people get help sooner. Every year, Mollyfest is held, a music festival in memory of the girl who believed in self-acceptance. At the same time, the McLaren family wages another campaign, public and persistent. They demand changes to stalking legislation. They demand that police treat stalking not as a domestic dispute, but as a systemic threat. In 2019, the United Kingdom passes the Stalking Protection Act, which comes into force at the beginning of 2020. The law introduces a mechanism for protective orders against stalkers that can be issued before criminal prosecution begins. It's a real tool that didn't exist in 2017, when Molly walked into the police station. But by 2022, it emerges that only 0.3% of registered stalking cases result in an application for such an order. Molly's parents call that figure staggering. The law exists, but it's applied only in exceptional cases. In 2024, the foundation holds its final Mollyfest and closes. The family says goodbye to the project, but not to the memory. Molly was 23 years old. She wrote about starting life over. She asked for help. And the system that was supposed to protect her answered with a phone call. On June 10, 2016, 22-year-old Christina Grimmie is standing in the lobby of the Plaza Live concert venue in Orlando. She just finished a show and, as always, opens her arms to hug every fan in the autograph line. One of them pulls out a gun. 3 million YouTube subscribers, third place on The Voice, a voice compared to Celine Dion, and it all ends at 10:24 p.m. The man who pulled the trigger had been preparing for this moment for months. He lost 50 pounds, got a hair transplant, bought 2 handguns. She had no idea he existed. This is the story of how obsession becomes a death sentence, and how a system that saw every warning sign failed to stop a single one. In the small town of Marlton, New Jersey, a girl of Italian-Romanian descent starts singing before she learns to read. Christina Victoria Grimmie is 6 years old when she first tries out her voice in front of a home audience. By 10, she's sitting at a piano, picking out melodies by ear. Her father, Albert, works at the telecom company Verizon. Her mother, Tina, is a receptionist. Her older brother, Marcus, becomes her first listener and biggest ally. The family isn't wealthy, but they support their daughter's passion unconditionally. In 2009, when Christina turns 15, she creates a YouTube channel under the username ZeldAxLove64, a nod to her favorite video game. Her first videos are covers of popular songs, recorded on a webcam in her bedroom. That August, she uploads a cover of Miley Cyrus's Party in the USA, and the video starts racking up views at a surprising pace. The internet notices the teenager from New Jersey. A year later, Christina records a collaborative cover of Just a Dream with YouTube musician Sam Tsui. The video hits 190 million views and launches her from the world of bedroom covers into the ranks of a new generation of YouTube stars. She catches the attention of Mandy Teefey, Selena Gomez's mother and manager. Teefey and her husband Brian take Christina under their wing and become her managers. For a girl from Marlton, this means stepping into a professional orbit. In 2011, her debut EP Find Me drops, landing at number 35 on the Billboard 200. By 2013, her channel has 2 million subscribers and a full studio album, With Love. Christina Grimmie is 19, and the road ahead is one most aspiring musicians can only dream of. That road leads her to the stage of America's biggest music competition show. In the spring of 2014, Christina Grimmie walks out for the blind auditions of Season 6 of The Voice. She picks Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball, a song that demands both power and control. From the very first notes, the room goes silent. All 4 coaches turn around: Usher, Shakira, Blake Shelton, and Adam Levine. That almost never happens. Christina picks Levine, Maroon 5's frontman, and he becomes her mentor. Vocal experts classify her voice as a light lyric soprano with a range of 3 octaves and 3 notes. Usher compares her to Celine Dion. Shakira calls her upper register otherworldly. Christina fights her way through battles, playoffs, and live shows. Her technique and artistry grow with every performance. On May 20th, 2014, she stands on the finale stage, performs Elvis Presley's Can't Help Falling in Love, and a duet of All of the Stars with Ed Sheeran, third place. The season winner is Josh Kaufman. But for Christina, third place turns out to be bigger than winning for many who came in first. Adam Levine announces on live television, regardless of the outcome, he's signing her to his label, 222 Records. Lil Wayne offers a contract with Young Money Entertainment. 20-year-old Christina declines both offers. She wants to develop on her own terms, to keep control over her music and her voice. The decision earns respect across the industry, but leaves her without a powerful promotional machine. Christina chooses freedom. She doesn't yet know the price she'll pay for it. Freedom comes at a cost. After The Voice, Christina signs with Island Records, but in March 2015, the label drops her. Commercial expectations fell short. The single, Must Be Love, doesn't crack the charts, and her YouTube audience doesn't convert into album sales as fast as a major label expects. Christina is left without a deal, but not without a plan. She puts out a collaboration with Dove Cameron, records new singles, keeps building her career brick by brick. In February 2016, her EP Side A comes out, number 171 on the Billboard 200. Not a flop, but not a breakthrough either. At the same time, Christina is actively touring, small venues, clubs holding 500 to 1,000 people, youth festivals. She doesn't have stadiums, but she has something many big stars lack: direct contact with her fans. After every show, she walks out to the lobby, sits down at a table, and signs posters, t-shirts, CDs. She hugs everyone who comes up, takes photos, talks. This isn't a marketing move or a contractual obligation. For Christina, closeness with her audience is part of her identity, a way to stay real. Brian Teefey, her manager, calls her a second daughter and says he wants to protect her from the industry's pitfalls. But the only actual protection at her concerts is Marcus. Her older brother travels with her as road manager, roadie, and bodyguard all in one. In the spring of 2016, Christina heads out on tour with the pop-rock band Before You Exit, the McDonough brothers, Riley, Connor, and Toby. They quickly become close friends. The tour schedule covers May and June, mid-size venues along the East Coast. June 10th is a show in Orlando, Florida, at the Plaza Live, 2 hours drive from Orlando, in St. Petersburg on the Gulf Coast lives 27-year-old Kevin James Loibl. He works at the electronics store Best Buy, lives with his father and brother in a quiet suburban house. Co-workers and neighbors describe him in one word: a recluse. He barely leaves his room, barely talks to anyone, spends his evenings and weekends glued to his computer. The only person you could call his friend is Corey Dennington. They've known each other 15 years, since their teenage days. Around 2015, a new fixation enters Loibl's life. He discovers Christina Grimmie's YouTube channel and can't stop. According to Dennington, Loibl starts spending most of his waking hours watching her videos. He watches every clip, every performance, every live stream. He monitors all of Christina's social media accounts, studies every post, every comment, every photo. Her image fills every corner of his existence. At work, Loibl starts telling coworkers he plays online games with Grimmie. When they question him or express doubt, he becomes aggressive and irritable. He claims Christina is his soulmate, that there's a special connection between them that others just don't understand. Dennington watches his friend's transformation and realizes he's losing touch with reality. Loibl says Christina's Christian faith changed him, that she turned his worldview upside down. He's convinced they're in a relationship. He's certain she knows about him. The reality is different. Between Kevin Loibl and Christina Grimmie, there is not a single point of contact. She doesn't know he exists. Not one message, not one reply, not one glance. The absence of any connection doesn't stop Loibl from preparing for what he calls their meeting. He decides he needs to look different, become someone she'll fall in love with at first sight. The changes start with his body. Loibl goes on a strict vegan diet and over several months loses about 50 pounds. His co-workers at Best Buy notice he's dropping weight fast, but they don't immediately learn why. Then he gets laser eye surgery and ditches his glasses, whitens his teeth, gets a hair transplant, expensive, and painful. Every step of this transformation, he explains the same way. He's doing it all for Grimmie. His coworkers watch these changes with growing unease. They see Loibl spending hours watching Christina's videos on his work computer. They hear him talk about his soulmate. They notice how he snaps when anyone questions whether the relationship is real. Several employees go to the store manager with a direct warning. Something is wrong with Loibl. His behavior is alarming. The manager sees the problem with his own eyes. He personally watches Loibl viewing Grimmie's videos on the job. But no conversation happens. Nobody calls the police. Nobody contacts a mental health service. The system doesn't kick in because, technically, no mechanism exists to make it kick in. Loibl has no criminal record, no diagnoses, no official complaints filed against him. There's only a mounting obsession that everyone around him can see, but that doesn't register on any threat database. At some point, Loibl encrypts his cell phone and destroys his home computer's hard drive. Before leaving the house for the last time, he says a phrase his loved ones will later remember: tired and ready to ascend. Ready to ascend. Behind those words is a concrete plan, prepared well in advance. On May 31st, 2016, Loibl walks into a gun shop and buys a 9mm Glock. The purchase is completely legal. He has no criminal record, no restrictions, nothing that would raise a flag for the seller or the federal background check system. Under Florida law, he's required to wait 5 days before picking up the weapon. Loibl waits and picks up the gun. On June 7th, 3 days before what he's planning, he buys a second 9mm Glock. Another legal purchase, another 5-day waiting period. He also picks up a large hunting knife and 2 additional loaded magazines. The arsenal is assembled. On June 9th, Loibl leaves his house in St. Petersburg. He doesn't get behind the wheel. He calls a cab. He pays the driver $200 for a round trip to Orlando. The distance between the cities is about 2 hours on the highway. In his backpack, toiletries, 2 handguns, 2 loaded magazines, a hunting knife, and a ticket to the Christina Grimmie and Before You Exit show at the Plaza Live. Loibl books a round-trip cab. It's a detail police will later flag. He pays for the ride back. This could mean he considered a scenario where he'd return home, or it could simply be the habit of a man who never drove a car. Fully decoding his intentions is impossible. His phone is encrypted, his computer destroyed, and Loibl himself will be dead within hours. Police will later say what the facts make obvious. Loibl traveled to Orlando with the intent to commit this crime. June 10th, 2016, Friday evening. The Plaza Live, a 1,000-seat concert venue in central Orlando, owned by the Orlando Philharmonic Orchestra Foundation. Tonight's performers are Before You Exit and Christina Grimmie. Their joint tour has been running for weeks. The crowd is young, mostly teenagers and college students, a festive atmosphere. Christina does what she does best, sings, jokes with the audience, fills the room with energy. In the crowd stands Kevin Loibl. Surveillance cameras will later capture him among the audience, watching the stage, blending in with everyone else. In his backpack are 2 loaded handguns, 2 spare magazines, and a hunting knife. The backpack passed through security at the entrance, but security at the Plaza Live that evening conducts only a cursory bag check. Their job is to make sure nobody brings in food or drinks, no metal detectors, no pat-downs. A backpack full of weapons sails through unchecked. Around 10 p.m., the concert ends. Christina does what she does after every show, walks out to the lobby for an autograph session. It's her ritual, her way of saying thank you to the fans. She sits at a table and a line forms in front of her. She signs posters, prints, t-shirts, hugs everyone who comes up, takes photos, smiles. Next to her is Marcus. He's the only one keeping an eye on what's happening around his sister. Christina has no professional security, never has. Loibl stands in line among ordinary fans, waiting his turn, patiently, calmly. Witnesses will later describe him in one word, nervous, and one more, creepy. At about 10:24 p.m., it's Loibl's turn. Christina looks at him the same way she looks at any other fan. With an open smile, she opens her arms for a hug. It's her gesture, her signature. Everyone who comes to the autograph session gets a hug. Loibl steps forward. Then he pulls a gun from behind his back and opens fire. Christina falls. Marcus Grimmie reacts instantly. He tackles the shooter, bringing him to the ground. Panic erupts. Screams, people running, chaos. Marcus pins Loibel, but the man breaks free. Loibel backs up against a wall and turns the weapon on himself. He dies on the spot. Police will later say that Marcus prevented further harm to Christina and her fans. Without his split-second reaction, a shooter carrying 2 handguns, 2 full magazines, and a hunting knife could have opened fire on the crowd. Marcus saved dozens of lives, but he couldn't save his sister. A doctor present in the venue immediately begins CPR. An ambulance rushes Christina to Orlando Regional Medical Center in critical condition. Doctors fight for her life. The autopsy results will later confirm the severity of her injuries. At 10:59 p.m., 35 minutes after the first shots, Christina Victoria Grimmie is pronounced dead. She is 22 years old. Just hours earlier, she stood on stage doing what she loved more than anything in the world. Now, the Plaza Live is cordoned off with yellow tape, and the news is already racing across every channel and social media feed. The news of Christina Grimmie's death circles the globe within minutes, but for Orlando police, the work is just beginning. The shooter is identified that same night. Kevin James Loibel, 27, St. Petersburg, Florida. He has ID on him, and his identity is confirmed without delay. Orlando Police Chief John Mina steps before the press and states the preliminary motive, an unhealthy and unrealistic infatuation with Christina Grimmie. Detectives reach out to Corey Dennington, Loibel's only friend, and to his Best Buy co-workers. The picture comes together quickly and clearly. Dennington describes a mounting obsession, hours of watching videos, monitoring social media, claims about a soulmate, a physical transformation for Grimmie. Co-workers confirm. They flag concerns about Loibel's mental state to their manager. Investigators check every possible channel of communication between Loibel and Grimmie. The result? 0. They never spoke. Not a single message, not a single comment, not a single crossing of paths. The obsession was entirely one-sided. Loibel's phone is encrypted. Investigators are unable to unlock it. The hard drive from his home computer was destroyed before he left. What exactly was stored on those devices will remain unknown forever. Loibel's family leaves a handwritten note at the police station with condolences and an apology to the Grimmie family. They declined to comment. They also declined to claim the body. It is cremated without a funeral or any ceremony. On June 22, 2016, 12 days after Christina's death, the investigation is officially closed. There is no one to prosecute. The shooter is dead. No one bears formal responsibility. In the eyes of the justice system, Kevin Loibel never existed as a threat. No convictions, no diagnoses, no complaints. An invisible man with 2 legally purchased handguns. The invisible man leaves shattered lives in his wake. On June 16th, Christina Grimmie's body is laid to rest at Berlin Cemetery in New Jersey. A private ceremony for those closest to her. Adam Levine covers all funeral expenses. The following day, June 17th, a public memorial is held in Medford. Thousands of people attend. Levine releases a statement. "I am absolutely devastated and heartbroken." Blake Shelton writes, "Stunned, outraged, and heartbroken." The Voice issues an official tribute. "We lost a beautiful soul with an amazing voice." Selena Gomez, for whom Christina was not just a protege but a close friend, performs an emotional tribute at a concert. She cancels all her autograph sessions. Brian Tiffy, Christina's manager and Selena's stepfather, creates a GoFundMe page with a goal of $4,000 to cover funeral costs and support the family. Within 2 days, $170,000 is raised. 25,000 people share the link on social media. Justin Bieber, Demi Lovato, Maroon 5, 21 Pilots dedicate their concert performances to Christina's memory. YouTube releases an official video tribute. The company's CEO, Susan Wojcicki, publicly expresses her grief. But the world doesn't get the chance to process what happened. Less than 30 hours after Christina Grimmie's death, in the same city of Orlando, a mass shooting takes place at the Pulse nightclub. 49 people are killed. That tragedy absorbs all the media oxygen, and Christina's story fades into the background. Billboard publishes an open letter calling for stricter gun control, roughly 200 signatures from musicians and producers. The letter mentions both tragedies. Selena Gomez is among the signatories. 2 shootings in the same city within 30 hours. Orlando in June 2016 becomes a symbol of something America cannot find an answer to. The answer the Grimmie family is looking for lies not in the realm of politics, but in a courtroom. In December 2016, 6 months after the tragedy, they file a civil wrongful death lawsuit. The defendants, the concert promoter, the foundation that owns the Plaza Live, and the security company responsible for safety that evening. The accusation is straightforward: a failure to provide adequate security measures. The family points to specific facts. Bag checks were superficial, there were no metal detectors, there were no pat-downs of attendees. An armed man walked through security with a backpack containing 2 handguns, 2 magazines, and a knife. The promoter and venue owner asked the court to dismiss the suit. Their argument rests on Florida law. Business owners cannot be held liable for attacks by third parties on their premises if they could not have reasonably foreseen the threat. In January 2017, a motion to dismiss is filed. The family reworks their complaint and refiles. In April 2018, the judge denies the defendant's motion. The case is allowed to proceed. But in December 2019, 3.5 years after Christina's death, the family voluntarily withdraws the lawsuit. The reasons are never made public. The legal question of whether the venue bore responsibility for its lack of security is never answered. No judicial precedent is set, but there are practical consequences. After Grimmie's death, the VidCon conference installs metal detectors at entrances and bans informal autograph sessions. Artists in Las Vegas begin receiving security escorts after performances. A music industry attorney tells reporters, "It's expensive and fans don't like it. But it's the new reality. A reality that came too late for Christina Grimmie. The new reality also shapes a new legacy." In April 2017, the Grimmie family launches the Christina Grimmie Foundation, an organization whose mission unites 2 themes that define the family's fate: helping victims of gun violence and supporting people fighting breast cancer. Christina's mother, Tina, knows both sides of this pain. She beat cancer 3 times. On June 9, 2017, one day before the first anniversary of her daughter's death, the posthumous album All Is Vanity is released, assembled from recordings Christina left unfinished. It's followed by singles: Invisible, Cry Wolf, Back to Life. Christina's voice keeps coming through the speakers after she's gone. On September 2, 2018, Tina Grimmie passes away. She is 59 years old. The cancer she beat 3 times comes back a 4th. Marcus, the same Marcus who tackled the shooter and saved dozens of lives in the lobby of the Plaza Live, is left alone. He takes over the foundation and his sister's legacy. February 2017 brings an episode of 48 Hours titled Stalked, dedicated to the Grimmie case. In June 2018, the podcast Christina Grimmie, The Murder of a Rising Star is released. But the most unexpected echo comes later. In 2022, Japanese-Australian musician Jodi releases the song Glimpse of Us on June 10th, the 6th anniversary of Christina's death. The song reaches number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100 and hits number 1 in 7 countries. Christina's fans notice the coincidence of the release date and the members of Before You Exit, the band Christina spent the last weeks of her life touring with, actively promote the release. There is no official confirmation of a connection between the song and Christina, but for those who remember her, there are too many coincidences. The girl who opened her arms to everyone keeps resonating, even in songs that were technically never written about her. On June 4, 2008, a Canon camera captured 30-year-old Travis Alexander posing in the shower of his home in Mesa, Arizona. 90 seconds later, that same camera took an accidental shot of his body on the bathroom floor. Between those 2 frames fit a crime that shook the entire state. The person behind the camera was his ex-girlfriend, Jodi Arias, who had driven over 1,000 miles through the desert to be in that house. She had dyed her hair, rented a car far from home, stocked up on gas cans to avoid stopping, and turned off her phone at the state border. Then she gave police 3 completely different versions of what happened. This is the story of how obsession with a person turns into a plan, and a plan turns into a crime that's impossible to hide. Travis Victor Alexander was born in Riverside, California, into a family where chaos was the norm. His parents struggled with substance abuse. There was no stability at home, and food was often scarce. When Travis turned 10, his Mormon grandmother took him and his brother in. She gave them what they had never had: a roof over their heads, structure, and faith. Travis embraced the teachings of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints wholeheartedly. He wore a ring engraved with "Choose the Right" as a reminder of the principles he wanted to live by. By 30, he owned a home in Mesa, Arizona. He worked for prepaid legal services, spoke at conferences as a motivational speaker, and even performed stand-up comedy under the stage name Eddie Snell. Friends described him as someone who filled up any room he walked into, energetic, generous, and inspiring. In the fall of 2006, at a PPL conference in Las Vegas, Travis met 26-year-old Jodi Arias. She was a freelance photographer from California. The attraction was instant. Arias began studying the Mormon faith, and within a few months, Travis personally baptized her. By February 2007, they were officially together. But from the very start, there was a contradiction baked into this relationship that would come to define it. Travis's faith demanded abstinence before marriage. The physical connection between them was intense. He was torn between his beliefs and his desires. She was willing to accept his terms, his faith, his world. For Travis, it was a painful rift between the person he wanted to be and who he became around her. For Arias, it was simpler. She had found someone she had no intention of letting go. Friends would later say Travis felt guilty for violating his own principles, but couldn't stop himself. No one in his circle yet understood how deeply Arias had already woven herself into his life. That understanding came too late. In June 2007, after 5 months together, Travis decided to break things off with Arias. He wanted to move forward, to meet a woman he could build a family with according to the rules of his faith. Arias took the breakup differently. Instead of returning to California, she moved from Palm Desert to Mesa, renting a place just minutes from Travis's house. The distance between them shrank, even though the relationship was officially over. Travis's friends started noticing strange things. Arias would show up at his house uninvited, peek through windows, walk in through an unlocked door. She gained access to his email and Facebook account, reading his conversations with other women. Someone slashed Travis's tires twice, and his friends were certain it was her. Travis complained to those close to him, but kept seeing Arias in secret. Every time he tried to cut ties, she threatened to harm herself. A vicious cycle. His friends didn't just hint. They told him directly, "This woman is dangerous. You need to cut off all contact." One of his female friends would later testify in court that several people in their circle had been warning Travis for months. He heard them, but didn't act. Meanwhile, Mimi Hall entered his life. They started dating and planned a trip to Cancun together. Travis saw her as a chance to start fresh. In January 2008, Arias finally left Mesa and moved back to Eureka, a small town in Northern California, to her grandparents' house. Over 1,000 miles separated them. It seemed like the worst was over, but the secret calls and messages between them never stopped. Travis couldn't fully sever the connection, and Arias had no intention of disappearing from his life. The distance created nothing more than an illusion of safety. What had been brewing in Arias's mind over those months would only become clear at the end of May 2008. On May 28, 2008, a burglary occurred at the home of Arias's grandparents in Eureka, California. Police documented the theft of a .25 caliber handgun, $30 in cash, a stereo system, and a DVD player. But one detail stood out even at that early stage. Another weapon sat in the same cabinet, and a jar full of coins worth a significant amount was on the shelf. None of that was touched. The burglar took only the small pistol and left. 5 days later, on June 2nd, Arias rented a white Ford Focus from a budget rent-a-car office in Redding. That's 90 miles from Eureka, even though there were rental agencies much closer to her home. The rental agent would later recall that she was blonde. Arias contacted an ex-boyfriend, Darrell Brewer, and asked to borrow 2 gas cans. He agreed without asking questions. On June 3rd, She stopped at a Walmart and bought a third 5-gallon gas can and 2 boxes of hair dye. The blonde dyed her hair dark. 3 cans held 15 gallons of gasoline. That was enough to cross all of Arizona without stopping at a single gas station, leaving no credit card receipts, avoiding surveillance cameras, registering nowhere. When the rental car approached the Arizona border, Arias turned off her cell phone. From that moment on, she was a ghost. Different car, different appearance, full tank, no signal. Each element of this trip could be explained on its own. But together, they formed a picture that the prosecution would later call irrefutable proof of premeditation. Arias headed southeast, toward Mesa, Arizona, toward the home of the man she had broken up with over a year ago. Ahead lay 1,000 miles of desert highway. Arias would cover that distance in a single night. On June 4th, 2008, around 4 in the morning, the white Ford Focus pulled up outside Travis Alexander's house on East Quincy Avenue in Mesa. Arias went inside. The roommates were asleep. Nobody saw her arrive. They spent the entire day together. Despite the relationship being long over, they were intimate again. Arias picked up a Canon camera belonging to Travis and began photographing him. First intimate shots, then portraits. Around 5 in the afternoon, she asked him to pose in the shower. Travis agreed. The timestamps on the camera's memory card would record what happened next, with second-by-second precision. At 5:22 p.m. and 24 seconds, Travis stood in the shower stall, water running down his body. Arias photographed him from various angles: his back, the back of his head, his profile. The last photo in which he was alive was taken at 5:30 p.m. and 30 seconds. 44 seconds later, the camera captured a random frame, the bathroom ceiling, blurry, shot in motion. Another minute later, at 5:32 p.m. and 16 seconds, the lens caught something else. A body lay on the bathroom floor, surrounded by dark stains. Less than 2 minutes had passed between the last living portrait and this frame. In that time, Travis Alexander sustained multiple stab wounds, a fatal wound to the neck area, and a gunshot wound. The 30-year-old motivational speaker, who had been trying to build a life according to the principles of his faith, died in his own bathroom. The camera that had just been capturing his portraits now documented his death. The debate between the prosecution and the defense over the sequence of injuries would drag on for years. The prosecutor would insist the stab wounds came first, while the defense would claim the gunshot happened earlier, accidentally. But one thing was undeniable. The intensity of the attack went far beyond any version of self-defense. What happened after the attack spoke to cold-bloodedness just as much as the attack itself. Arias didn't panic. She acted methodically. Travis's body remained in the bathroom. She cleaned up the evidence, wiped away blood, moved the body back into the shower stall. She placed the Canon camera with the memory card that held the entire timeline of the last few hours into the washing machine, along with laundry, and started a wash cycle. The knife and the gun vanished without a trace. Investigators would never recover the weapons. Arias left Travis's house, got into the rented Ford Focus, and headed north toward Utah. Ryan Burns was waiting for her there, a new acquaintance she had been texting with for the past few weeks. The following day, June 5th, a Utah state trooper pulled her over for a violation. The rear license plate on the car was mounted upside down, and the front one was missing entirely. Arias calmly explained to the officer that friends must have played a prank. The officer issued a warning and let her go. A few hours later, she arrived at Burns's place. He would later tell investigators that Arias seemed completely normal. She hugged him, smiled, joked around. She had small cuts and bandages on her hands. She explained that she had cut herself at work in a restaurant, breaking a glass. It never occurred to Burns to doubt her. All this time, Travis Alexander's body lay in the shower stall behind the locked door of his bedroom in Mesa. His roommates walked down the hallway, cooked in the shared kitchen, came and went. Nobody opened his door. Nobody noticed a smell. The house was large, the rooms spread out. Billings and the other roommate, Enrique Cortez, went about their lives, coming and going. Travis's bedroom door was closed, but that was nothing unusual. The Arizona heat outside the walls reached over 100 degrees. Inside, the air conditioning was running. For now. 1 day passed, then 2, then 3. Travis wasn't answering calls, wasn't showing up online, wasn't joining his prepaid legal services conference calls. For someone who was normally glued to his phone, this was inexplicable. Friends sent him messages, pinged him on every platform. Silence. His roommates, Zach Billings and Enrique Cortez, didn't pay much attention. Travis's bedroom door was closed. His car was parked in the garage. They assumed he had gone somewhere with someone, or was just busy. Billings would later tell investigators he hadn't seen Travis since early June, but hadn't worried about it. Everyone had their own schedule. By June 9th, the alarm was growing. Mimi Hall, with whom Travis had planned to fly to Cancun the next day, couldn't reach him. She contacted mutual friends. Several of them decided to drive to his house. Mimi and two acquaintances arrived at the house on East Quincy Avenue. Billings opened the door. "Where's Travis?" He shrugged. "Probably in Mexico." Mimi shook her head. "No, we're supposed to fly together tomorrow. He's not in Mexico." Someone knew the code to the garage door. Inside sat Travis's car. That meant he was home. Billings went upstairs to the bedroom and opened the door. On the carpet near the entrance to the bathroom, a dark pool had spread. He walked further. In the shower stall lay the body of Travis. 5 days in an enclosed space in Arizona's heat had done their work. Friends called 911. Within 20 minutes, Mesa police cruisers lined the street outside the house. Detective Esteban Flores walked into the bathroom and encountered a scene he would later describe as one of the most difficult of his entire career. Crime scene technicians began processing the scene. Signs of a struggle were found in the hallway, by the sink, in the bathroom, and in the bedroom. The victim had moved after the initial wounds, and the attack had continued at multiple points throughout the house. In the washing machine, they found the Canon camera. The memory card had been through water, but the data had survived. Digital forensic specialists with the Mesa police connected it to their equipment and launched a deleted file recovery procedure. The results exceeded expectations. Dozens of photographs were extracted from the card. They formed a timeline: daytime intimate shots, then a portrait series in the shower, then accidental frames captured during the attack. Timestamps were recovered. Investigators had a minute-by-minute reconstruction of Travis's final hours. But the camera wasn't the only piece of evidence. On the bathroom wall, crime scene technicians found a bloody palm print. Analysis determined it was a mixed sample containing both the victim's blood and the DNA of another person. That other person was Jodi Arias. A strand of hair not belonging to Travis was found on the floor. Near the body lay a spent shell casing, .25 caliber ACP, the same caliber as the gun stolen from Arias's grandparents' home in Arica the week before. Detective Flores began piecing together the picture: the rental car, the gas cans, the dyed hair, the flipped license plate, the turned-off phone. Each fact on its own could have had an innocent explanation. Together, they pointed in one direction. Flores contacted Arias and asked her to voluntarily come in for fingerprinting and DNA sampling. She agreed without the slightest hesitation, as though she had nothing to hide. Her composure was so complete that even experienced investigators found it more unsettling than any confession would have been. A person whose palm print had been found in the victim's blood behaved as if she were discussing a traffic ticket. On July 15, 2008, Arias was arrested. But even before the arrest, during initial questioning, she exhibited behavior that would baffle investigators and later become one of the most talked about moments of the trial. The surveillance camera in the interrogation room captured Arias, left alone, doing a handstand against the wall. She hummed a song. She fixed her makeup, studying her reflection in the monitor screen. When Detective Flores entered and began asking questions, Arias radiated calm. First version, she wasn't in Mesa on June 4th. She last saw Travis in March. She had no idea what happened. Flores laid out the evidence: the palm print, the hair, the photographs from the camera. Arias didn't flinch. She switched to a second version. Yes, she was in the house, but two strangers in masks had broken in. They attacked Travis. She barely escaped, ran out, but was too frightened to call the police. Arias maintained this story for 2 years. From jail, she gave interviews to Inside Edition and the show 48 Hours, repeating the intruder story confidently and with details. Prosecutor Juan Martinez would later show these recordings to the jury, specifically to demonstrate how convincingly Arias could lie. In 2010, 3 years before the trial began, she changed her story a third time. Now she admitted, Yes, she had taken Travis's life, but it was self-defense. Travis, she claimed, had been a controlling abuser who regularly humiliated her and was physically aggressive. That day she accidentally dropped the camera, he flew into a rage and attacked her. She grabbed the gun in a panic. 3 versions in 2 years. Each new one appeared at precisely the moment the previous one crumbled under the weight of the facts. On January 2nd, 2013, the trial of State versus Jodi Arias began in Maricopa County Superior Court in Phoenix. The prosecution sought the death penalty. From the very first days, the trial turned into a media event of national scale. The cable network HLN broadcast the proceedings live and launched a special show called After Dark, devoted entirely to this case. Lines formed outside the courthouse. People traveled from other states just to get a seat in the gallery. Prosecutor Juan Martinez built the case on a chain of evidence pointing to premeditation. He laid out the timeline of preparation before the jury. The stolen gun, the rental car far from home, the gas cans, the dyed hair, the turned-off phone, the flipped license plate. Martinez presented each element as a deliberate step toward a premeditated attack. Defense attorneys Kirk Nermy and Jennifer Wilmot constructed the opposite narrative. Their client was a victim of years of abuse who had been defending herself against an attacker. They called expert witnesses. Psychologist Richard Samuels diagnosed Arias with PTSD, and specialist Alice Laviolette confirmed patterns of domestic control in Travis's behavior. Martinez dismantled their testimony during cross-examinations. Arias herself spent 18 days on the witness stand, which was unprecedented for a case of this kind. Martinez questioned her aggressively, methodically trapping her in contradictions between her 3 versions of events. He showed the jury recordings of her police interrogations and jailhouse interviews, highlighting the contrast between the cold-blooded confidence of her lies and the fragility of her final version. 67 days of hearings. The trial became a symbol of the era of televised justice. HLN's ratings soared. The question was no longer what happened in the bathroom on East Quincy Avenue. The question was how far the preparation had gone, and whether Arias had planned every step long before the drive to Arizona. On May 8, 2013, after 15 hours of deliberation, the jury returned to the courtroom. The verdict: guilty of premeditated first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered, and they greeted the news with applause. Travis Alexander's sisters and brothers wept, embracing one another. Travis himself, who had grown up in a family shattered by addiction, who had found his footing in faith and community, posthumously became a symbol of the victim who was warned but couldn't walk away in time. The sentencing phase began. The prosecution pushed for the death penalty. For that, the jury had to vote unanimously. But there was no unanimity. The first panel reached an impasse. 8 votes for death, 4 against. The judge declared a mistrial on sentencing for that panel. In 2014, a new sentencing phase was scheduled with fresh jurors. It stretched on for months. The second panel voted 11 for death, 1 against. Another deadlock. Under Arizona law, after 2 failed attempts, the sentencing decision falls to the judge. On April 13, 2015, Judge Sherry Stevens announced the sentence: life in prison without the possibility of parole. In her ruling, Stevens noted that the crime had been especially brutal and meticulously planned, but she took into account Arias's lack of prior criminal record and expert conclusions about her mental state. Before the sentence was read, Arias addressed the court. She said, "I still can't believe I was capable of this." Travis's family delivered victim impact statements. His sister said, "We will never be the same." Travis's brother added that every morning he wakes up and remembers that Travis is gone. For a family that had already endured a devastating childhood, losing Travis was a blow from which there would be no recovery. The verdict didn't end the story. Arias filed an appeal, arguing that the atmosphere in the courtroom had deprived her of the right to a fair trial. Her attorneys pointed to the live broadcasts, the crowds of spectators, and the behavior of the prosecutor, who had turned the proceedings into a spectacle. Martinez, who had become a public figure over the course of the trial, did indeed conduct himself as if he were on a stage rather than in a hall of justice. He signed autographs, posed for photos with fans, and chatted with bloggers outside the courtroom. In 2020, the Arizona Court of Appeals reviewed Arias' appeal and rejected it. The conviction stood. That same year, fate caught up with Martinez himself, though not for his conduct during the Arias trial. An investigation into allegations of misconduct toward a journalist who had covered the trial led to the revocation of his law license. The man who had built a career on exposing lies lost the right to practice law for reasons unrelated to his professional victories. Arias is held at the Perryville Women's Prison in Goodyear, Arizona. She will spend the rest of her life there. The Jodi Arias case has become one of the most studied examples of how obsession with a former partner transforms into the methodical planning of a crime. Criminologists and psychologists use it in their courses. Documentaries, podcasts, and books continue to come out year after year. The Canon camera that survived a wash cycle in a washing machine remains the central symbol of this case. Technology captured what a person tried to destroy. Travis Alexander's family has made public appeals urging people to pay attention to warning signs in relationships. They repeat what their friends told Travis when he was alive. Sometimes another person's obsession doesn't just go away on its own. A man who had pulled himself out of poverty and chaos, built a career, and found faith couldn't recognize the threat in someone he once loved in time. On December 8, 2004, in a small rock club called Alrosa Villa in Columbus, Ohio, a man with a pistol rushes the stage during a concert. His target is Dimebag Darrell, one of the most influential guitarists in the history of heavy music. The shooter is 25 years old. He was discharged from the Marine Corps with a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia. He is not taking his medication. He is armed with a pistol his mother gave him as a gift. 8 months earlier, he already stormed the stage at a Damageplan show and walked away without any consequences. 3 minutes, 4 lives, 15 shots. How the system missed every single warning sign again and again. And why a musician who changed the sound of an entire genre was left defenseless against a man who could have been stopped long before that evening. On August 20th, 1966, in the small town of Ennis, Texas, a second son is born to country producer Jerry Abbott and his wife Carolyn. They name him Darrell Lance Abbott. His father makes a living recording country albums in a home studio, and the house is literally soaked in music. But Darrell is not drawn to country. He is mesmerized by the heavy riffs of Black Sabbath, the virtuoso solos of Eddie Van Halen, and the theatrics of Kiss. At 12, he gets his first guitar, a cheap Hondo in the style of a Les Paul and a tiny Pignose amplifier. From that moment on, the instrument never leaves his hands. Darrell takes no formal lessons. He learns by lifting parts off records and watching the musicians who come to record at his father's studio. 2 years later, the 14-year-old steps onto the stage of the Agora Ballroom Club in Dallas and wins a guitar competition. The judge, guitar builder Dean Zielinski, will later say the kid blew everyone away. In 1981, Darrell and his older brother, drummer Vinnie Paul, form a band that will eventually be called Pantera. The early years are glam metal in the style of the era, and on stage Darrell goes by the stage name Diamond Darrell. Everything changes in 1986, when a new vocalist, Phil Anselmo, joins the group. He brings aggression, fury, and an entirely different sonic direction. 4 years later, the album Cowboys from Hell drops, and the world of heavy music gets a brand new subgenre, groove metal. Darrell Abbott's guitar stands at the very core of that sound. Low, crunchy riffs built on palm muting and powerful chord structures set the standard that dozens of bands will copy for the next 20 years. Nobody yet knows that the journey from a Texas teenager with a cheap guitar to one of the most influential guitarists in metal history will end on a club stage in Ohio on a cold December night. By the mid-90s, Pantera becomes one of the most powerful live acts in the world. The album Far Beyond. Driven debuts at number 1 on the Billboard 200 in 1994, 186,000 copies in the first week. The music press calls it the heaviest album ever to hold that position. Darrell Abbott is at his peak. His guitar tone defines an entire generation of metal. But inside the band, cracks are already forming that will eventually become fault lines. Vocalist Phil Anselmo suffers from chronic back pain after years of performing. He moves to prescription painkillers, then to heroin. On tour, Anselmo isolates himself on his own bus. His behavior on stage becomes unpredictable. He lashes out at the audience, cuts songs short, goes off on rambling monologues. By the time the band records The Great Southern Trendkill, they are already working separately. The Abbott brothers and bassist Rex Brown record in Texas. Anselmo records at Trent Reznor's studio in New Orleans. The album comes out in May 1996, and 2 months later, on July 13th, after a show in Dallas, Anselmo overdoses on heroin. His heart stops for 4 to 5 minutes. Medics bring him back, but the incident permanently deepens the rift inside the band. On September 12, 1999, the Abbott brothers' mother, Carolyn, dies of lung cancer. For Darrell and Vinnie, it is a loss that changes everything. Work on the final studio album, Reinventing the Steel, in 2000 becomes an ordeal. Anselmo does not show up to sessions and records his parts remotely. By 2003, Pantera has effectively ceased to exist. There is no official breakup announcement. 20 years of working together end in silence. The Abbott brothers have no intention of leaving music. In 2003, they form a new band called Damage Plan, recruiting vocalist Patrick Lachman and bassist Bob Kakaha. On February 10, 2004, their debut album Newfound Power is released. It reaches number 38 on the Billboard chart and sells 44,000 copies in its first week. The numbers are far from Pantera's triumphs, but Darrell approaches the new project with enthusiasm. Damage Plan heads out on a club tour across America. Small venues, cramped dressing rooms, the audience within arm's reach. For Darrell, this is not a step backward, but a return to his roots. He is known as a guy who comes out into the crowd after every show, drinks with fans, takes photos, and talks for hours. The nickname Dimebag, originally given to him by Anselmo as a nod to the fact that Darrell never carried more than a small amount of marijuana, so he would not have problems with the law, has long since replaced his real name. At home, Rita Haney is waiting for him, his partner since 1984. They have been together for 20 years and will never marry. "We don't believe in the whole marriage thing," she will say later. During this same period, about 400 kilometers to the northeast, in the small town of Marysville, Ohio, 25-year-old Nathan Gale returns from the Marine Corps. He served fewer than 2 of the standard 4 years. The reason for his discharge is a diagnosis made by military doctors: paranoid schizophrenia. The Marine Corps refuses to comment on the details. Gale comes home with medications he has been prescribed to take, but he will not take them. Nathan Miles. Gale is born on September 11, 1979, in Chicago, Illinois, the youngest of 3 brothers in the family of Gerald and Mary Gale. His early years are spent in the suburb of Lansing before his parents divorce. His mother takes Nathan with her to Marysville, Ohio. The 2 older brothers stay with their father. Nathan attends several schools, briefly takes up wrestling, and, in 1998, graduates from Ohio High Point Career Center, with a specialty in construction and electrical work. After graduation, his life takes a downward turn. Low-paying jobs, drug problems, stretches of living on the street, and scraping by through panhandling and petty theft. The police know him, arrests for trespassing, and 1 charge of theft. He goes through a rehabilitation program, but never finds stability. Already during this period, Gale starts complaining to the people around him that he is being watched. After the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, Gale decides to enlist. In February 2002, he is accepted into the Marine Corps and shipped to Camp Lejeune in North Carolina, where he is assigned to the 2nd Marine Division. His service lasts less than 2 years. In November 2003, Gale is discharged. According to family and acquaintances, the reason is a diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia. The Marines officially neither confirm nor deny this. After returning to Marysville, Gale receives a Christmas gift from his mother, a Beretta 92 FS 9mm pistol. Mary Gale purchased the weapon after her son completed boot camp, well before his discharge. Now, a man diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia who refuses treatment legally owns a combat pistol. The Department of Veterans Affairs helps Gale find a job and places him as a mechanic at an oil change shop. The shop's owner, Rich Senkola, later recounts that Gale disclosed his diagnosis at the time of hiring. Outwardly, Gale does not look like a stereotypical patient. 6 feet 3 inches tall, over 250 pounds, broad shoulders. He plays offensive lineman for a semi-professional football team called the Lima Thunder. Before games, he blasts Pantera at full volume. He has been listening to them since his teenage years, and the music has long since stopped being just background noise. Nathan's friend Dave Johnson later tells reporters a strange detail. Gale shows him Pantera lyrics and claims they are his words. The band, he says, stole his lyrics and is trying to steal his identity. This is not just a fan's obsession, it is persecutory thinking, one of the hallmark symptoms of paranoid schizophrenia. To another acquaintance, Mark Brick, Gale states that God is asking him to carry out an attack on a famous musician. Neighbors and casual acquaintances notice more and more oddities. Gale talks to himself and laughs for no reason. He pretends to walk an imaginary dog on a leash. He shows up at the tattoo parlor across from his apartment and stares at customers for hours, talking out loud about heavy metal. He lives alone in an apartment above an abandoned store. He does not take his prescribed antipsychotics. The police know him from minor infractions, parking tickets, arrests for vagrancy. But no one who sees these warning signs reports them in a way that triggers any kind of intervention. The veterans' mental health system has no provision for mandatory oversight of those who voluntarily refuse treatment. On April 8, 2004, Damage Plan performs at a club called Bogart's in Cincinnati, Ohio. The concert is going as usual when a man leaps from the crowd onto the stage. It is Nathan Gale. He charges at the musicians, and chaos erupts. Police on duty at the venue wrestle with Gale. During the struggle, he causes $1,800 worth of damage to stage equipment, lighting rigs, stands, and cables. Officers log 2 violations in their report, creating a threat to public safety and destruction of property. Gale is detained and taken away. The incident looks like a typical outburst from an aggressive fan, unpleasant but nothing extraordinary. Damage Plan vocalist Patrick Lockman even jokes after the show, "Let me introduce you to the 5th member of the band." Damage Plan decides not to press charges. The reason is practical. If the case goes to court, the band members will have to return to Cincinnati to testify, and the tour is booked for months ahead. So Gale walks away without any legal consequences. No restraining order, no court ruling, no check for weapons, no evaluation of his mental state. The police report goes into the archives and leads to no further action. 8 months later, this same man shows up at another Damage Plan concert. This time, he brings not just intent, but a loaded pistol with a full magazine and 30 extra rounds. Looking back, the incident at Bogart's looks like an alarm that nobody heard, the last moment when the course of events could have been changed. December 8, 2004. Columbus, Ohio. Exactly 24 years earlier, on this same day, John Lennon was shot dead outside his home in New York. A coincidence that millions of people will later discuss, but investigators determine it was purely random. On the north side of Columbus, on Sinclair Road, stands Alrosa Villa, a small rock club founded by a couple named Al and Rosa Cautela. The venue holds 600 people, but tonight it is less than half full. About 250 tickets have been sold, though by the time the headliner takes the stage, the crowd has grown to roughly 400. Damage Plan is headlining. The band is no longer operating at Pantera's stadium scale, but for the local audience, this is an event. Dimebag. Darrell is playing within arm's reach. Around 10:20 in the evening, the band takes the stage. Darrell picks up his guitar. Vinnie Paul sits behind the drums. The first song of the set begins. The atmosphere in the room is typical of a club-level metal show. Dim lights, heavy sound, the smell of beer and sweat. Among the crowd, no one notices the tall, broad-shouldered man in a Columbus Blue Jackets hockey jersey and a hoodie with the hood up. Nathan Gale did not come in through the main entrance. He climbed over a 6-foot fence enclosing the club's back lot and slipped inside through a patio door. Under his clothes, he carries a Beretta 92 FS with a full magazine and about 30 extra rounds in his pockets. The band is playing. The crowd moves to the beat. In a matter of seconds, everything will change. Gale rushes the stage in the middle of the first song. In his hand is the Beretta 92 FS. The first shots are aimed at Darrell Abbott. Several rounds hit him at point-blank range. The guitarist goes down instantly. 38-year-old Dimebag Darrell, the man who changed the sound of heavy music, dies on stage with his guitar in his hands. The room freezes for a split second, then erupts into panic. Tour manager Chris Paluska, standing off to the side of the stage, takes a bullet to the chest. He will survive, but in these seconds he does not know that. The shooter keeps going. Damage Plan's head of security, Jeffrey Mayhem Thompson, a 40-year-old man known throughout the tour as someone who would do anything for the band, charges Gale from behind. Thompson knocks the shooter to the ground, and a hand-to-hand struggle breaks out on stage. Those few seconds give Vinnie Paul and guitar tech John Graham time to escape the stage. But Gale is bigger and stronger. He breaks free and shoots Thompson multiple times. Thompson is killed. 23-year-old Nathan Bray, a Damage Plan fan, a husband and father to a 2-year-old boy, sees what is happening on stage and makes a decision that costs him his life. He climbs up from the crowd and begins administering first aid to Abbott and Thompson, attempting CPR. When he notices the shooter just a few feet away, Bray turns to face him. One shot to the chest. Bray goes down. 3 people are dead within seconds. Gale does not stop. He still has ammunition, and he keeps firing at anyone within range. Aaron Stoney Hawk, a 29-year-old Alrosa Villa security guard, sees what is happening and does not leave. Hawk is a former Marine, a man accustomed to acting under extreme conditions. He charges at the shooter, trying to stop him. Gale drives him back with gunfire. Hawk retreats, regroups, and goes in again. Time after time, he is thrown back by bullets, but he does not leave the room. When Gale begins to change the magazine or reload, Hawk sees his chance and launches a final charge. Multiple hits. Hawk goes down and does not get up again. The shooter's 4th victim. Gale grabs wounded tech John Cat Brooks, who has been shot in both legs, locks him in a chokehold, presses the pistol to his temple, and begins using him as a human shield. Roadie Travis Burnett sustains a grazing wound to his left forearm. The room is chaos, screaming, people trying to get out through any exit they can find. Less than 3 minutes have passed since the first shot. Officer James Niggemeyer of the Columbus Police Department is the first to arrive on a 911 call. He does not go through the main entrance. Instead, Niggemeyer circles the building and enters through a service door behind the stage, holding a 12-gauge Remington 870 shotgun at the ready. From the doorway, he sees the scene. A large man with a pistol pressed to a hostage's head, bodies on the stage, wounded on the floor. The distance is roughly 6 meters. Niggemeyer raises the shotgun and fires once. A direct hit. Gale drops instantly. He still has about 35 rounds left in his pistol and pockets. 3 minutes of shooting end with 1 shot from behind the curtain. The autopsy of Nathan Gale's body is performed by the Franklin County Coroner's Office. The toxicology results are both expected and chilling. The shooter's blood contains no prescription medications and no substances of any kind. No antipsychotics that were prescribed to him upon discharge from the Marines. No drugs, no alcohol. Gale acted in a state of complete biochemical clarity, if that word can even be applied to a person with untreated paranoid schizophrenia. Police search his apartment, a room above an abandoned store in Marysville. Among his belongings, they find 2 handwritten notes. The first reads, "You'll see come alive. I'll take your life and make it mine. This is my life. I'm gone. Get me." The second, "Do it and die. Do it and die." The words resemble fragments of song lyrics but do not match any known composition. Investigators attempt to establish a motive and hit a dead end. Early reports claim Gale shouted, "You broke up Pantera," while on stage, but not a single witness interviewed confirms hearing those words. Journalists dig up a Phil Anselmo interview in Metal Hammer magazine, published shortly before the shooting, in which the former Pantera vocalist said Abbott deserves a severe beating. The investigation examines this lead and finds no evidence that Gale ever read the interview or knew about it. The coincidence of the date with the anniversary of John Lennon's death is deemed random. Nothing in the notes, behavior, or words of Gale points to a deliberate parallel. The shooter's mother, Mary Gale, will later tell reporters the single phrase that explains more than the entire investigation. He was sick. My son was sick. On May 23, 2005, a Franklin County grand jury clears Officer James Niggemeyer of any wrongdoing. Prosecutor Ron O'Brien states that charges were never expected. The officer's actions fully complied with protocol and saved the hostage's life. Niggemeier receives one award after another. Officer of the Year from the National Rifle Association for 2005, the Outstanding Valor Award from Ohio Attorney General Jim Petro, and he becomes a finalist for a Courage Award from America's Most Wanted. But behind those accolades stands a man who cannot get what he saw backstage at Alrosa Villa out of his head. Niggemeier is diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder and severe anxiety disorder. For 3 years, he continues working, responding to calls as a first responder. Then he transfers to the Robbery Investigation Unit, away from the front line. In 2011, he leaves the Columbus Police Department for another city position. The toll of that night: 4 dead, not counting the shooter, 3 wounded, 15 shots in 3 minutes. Jeffrey Thompson, Nathan Bray, and Aaron Halk are posthumously recognized as heroes, each of them knowingly charged an armed man trying to stop him. Thompson bought Vinnie Paul time to escape. Bray tried to render aid to the wounded. Halk attacked the shooter again and again until he fell. For Vinnie Paul, the tragedy becomes a point of no return. He refuses to speak with Phil Anselmo or bassist Rex Brown, and that rift will last for the rest of his life. Anselmo publicly expresses his grief, but for Vinnie, the former vocalist's words no longer mean anything. Thousands of people attend Darrell Abbott's funeral in Arlington, Texas. Among them are Eddie Van Halen, Zakk Wylde, Corey Taylor, Jerry Cantrell, and Dino Cazares. Gene Simmons of Kiss donates a signature Kiss casket, a coffin originally released as band merchandise, for the burial. Eddie Van Halen places inside it his original black and yellow 1979 Charvel Bumblebee guitar, the very one he used to record the first albums. Only the original deserves the original, Van Halen will say. In the months and years after the tragedy, the world of heavy music responds with dozens of tributes. Black Label Society records In This River. Nickelback releases Side of a Bullet, which features a previously unreleased guitar solo by Dimebag. Machine Head creates Aesthetics of Hate, a track that earns a Grammy nomination. Albums by Disturbed, Crowbar, and Static X are released with dedications to Abbott on the covers. Starting in 2010, the annual Dime Bash Festival is held, where dozens of musicians perform songs by Pantera and Damage Plan. Alrosa Villa continues operating for another 16 years. The club's founders, Al and Rosa Cautela, pass away, and their children manage the venue until 2020, when the pandemic forces its doors shut. In December 2021, the club is demolished. A residential complex is built in its place. On June 22, 2018, Vinnie Paul dies. He is buried next to his brother in the same kind of Kiss casket. The Abbott brothers are together again. In 2022, Pantera reunites for world tours with Zakk Wylde on guitar and Charlie Benante on drums in place of Darrell and Vinnie. Rolling Stone places Darrell Abbott at number 92 on its list of the 100 greatest guitarists of all time. The club is gone, but the music never went silent.